Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Story Relaxing. Tonight we are stepping quietly through crunching snow toward a small log cabin, the kind that squats low against the wind, its roof already heavy with white. You're cold before you even reach the door. Your boots feel stiff. Your eyelashes threaten to freeze together if you blink too slowly. This is not a cozy holiday fantasy, and you probably would not survive this without a lot of practice and a bit of luck. Still, there is something magnetic about the faint glow leaking from the chinks between the logs, a promise of shelter after a long day of travel. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are listening from somewhere warm or somewhere already dark, go ahead and post your location and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights. You reach the door just as the last blue scraps of daylight dissolve into a deep winter dusk. The cabin stands alone, surrounded by trees that seem to lean inward, as if curious about you. You push the wooden door open and step inside, carrying snow with you in clumps. The air is immediately different. It smells like old smoke, damp wood, and something faintly animal. That smell will become familiar very quickly. This cabin is small, maybe one room, maybe a low loft if you are lucky. Historically, many frontier log cabins in North America were around 16 by 20 feet, barely larger than a modern living room. That is a mainstream fact often mentioned in settlement records and diaries. You take a moment to stamp your feet, because if you do not, the snow will melt into icy puddles that refreeze by morning. There is no mudroom. There is no hallway. This space does everything at once. The walls are thick logs, roughly squared, stacked with care but not precision. You can see the marks where an axe bit into them months or years ago. Some logs still hold flecks of bark. Historians still argue whether early builders prioritized speed over insulation, or if the roughness was actually intentional to trap air and retain heat. Either way, you feel the cold radiating inward, a quiet reminder that wood is not magic. Outside winter has already claimed the land. Inside winter is negotiating. The cabin is unheated right now. The hearth sits dark and empty, a black mouth waiting to be fed. You shrug off a pack, maybe a bedroll, maybe a bundle of supplies. Your shoulders ache. Travel in winter was slower and more exhausting than we tend to imagine. Even short distances could feel endless when snow-swallowed paths and landmarks disappeared. You close the door behind you and the sound is heavy final. Silence follows, the kind that presses on your ears. No hum of electricity, no distant traffic, just the faint whistle of wind finding gaps in the logs. You probably notice it right away that the silence is not empty. It is layered alive in its own quiet way. A quirky detail often overlooked is that many early cabins were built without windows at first. Glass was expensive, fragile, and hard to transport. If there is a window here at all, it might be tiny, covered with oiled paper or animal hide. You move carefully, hands outstretched, memorizing the space by touch. Your fingers brush a rough table, a stool. The edge of the hearth cold as stone can be. You finally get a fire going, though that comes later. For now you're just arriving. Your breath clouds in front of you, even indoors. That breath becomes part of the cabin, adding moisture that will freeze into delicate frost patterns by morning. People living like this knew their own breathing could make the interior colder overnight, a strange feedback loop of survival. You set down what little light you have. Maybe a lantern. Maybe a bundle of resinous pine slivers meant to catch a spark. Light immediately reshapes the room. Shadows jump and stretch, making the cabin feel both larger and more crowded. You're aware suddenly that night has truly begun. Outside, the sun will not be back for a very long time. In deep winter, nights could stretch 14 or even 16 hours at higher latitudes. That is a lot of darkness to lie inside your own thoughts. There is a subtle mental shift that happens here. Modern people often underestimate it. When the day ends this early, you do not simply go to bed. You pace, you prepare, you listen. Sleep will come later, but only after you make peace with the idea that nothing much will change until morning. Some settlers believed the first night in a new cabin was the most dangerous not because of animals or weather, but because of mistakes. Forgetting to seal a gap, misjudging the fire, underestimating the cold. There are fringe stories whispered in later folklore about cabins that killed careless sleepers on their first night, freezing them quietly as they slept too deeply. Historians still debate how much truth lies behind these tales, versus how much they served as cautionary storytelling. You run your hand along the wall again, feeling the uneven surface. Each log represents labour done in warmer months when survival felt theoretical. Now it is immediate. The cabin does not feel romantic yet. It feels like a tool, a shelter that will demand attention in exchange for keeping you alive. As you begin to organise your things, you realise that sleeping here will not be an escape from winter. It will be a negotiation with it night after long night. You are not just staying in a cabin. You're committing to an entire season of darkness, cold and repetition. The fire will become your clock. Your body will learn new rhythms. And tonight, as you finally sit down and let the fatigue settle into your bones, you understand that sleep in this place will never be passive. It will be something you work toward, something you earn, something that can be taken away if you are careless. You sit there a moment longer, listening to the wind outside brush the walls like a hand testing for weakness. Inside the cabin waits with you. The first night settles in slowly, not with drama, but with a creeping certainty that the cold is winning more ground than you expected. You have the fire going, now a modest one because wood is precious, and you already understand that burning too much too fast is a mistake you cannot afford. The flames crackle softly, throwing light that trembles across the log walls. You sit close, then pull back, learning the narrow band where heat exists at all. Too far and you shiver, too close and your face feels tight and dry. This is the shock of the first night. Not fear exactly, but recalibration. Your body realizes that the rules have changed. Even inside, even with fire, winter has not been shut out. It has simply been invited to wait its turn. You start to prepare for sleep earlier than feels natural. There is nothing else to do. Historically, many people in pre-industrial societies went to bed shortly after dark, especially in winter. Diaries from the 18th and 19th centuries often mention turning in soon after supper, not out of laziness but practicality. Light costs fuel. Staying awake costs warmth. You feel both slipping away if you linger too long. You arrange your bedding near the hearth, close enough to benefit from residual heat, but far enough to avoid sparks. Bedding is simple, a straw mattress if you're lucky. Blankets that are heavy, uneven and faintly stiff. Furs perhaps with a smell that reminds you this warmth once walked and breathed. A quirky but true detail is that some settlers slept directly on pine boughs, refreshed periodically to discourage insects and add a bit of scent to the cabin. It sounds rustic and charming till you lie down and feel every twig pressing back. As you lie there, the fire begins its slow decline. Flames shrink to glowing embers. The light dims, shadows thickening in the corners. You consider feeding the fire again, but hesitate. Night is long. You cannot stay awake all of it. Eventually you let the fire rest, trusting the coals to hold on a while longer. The cold responds immediately. It creeps across the floor, first a low tide of chill that finds your feet even under layers. You pull blankets tighter, tucking edges in ways that feel almost ceremonial. This is not comfort as you know it. It is containment. You close your eyes, but sleep does not come easily. The silence feels louder now. Every sound has weight. The snap of a cooling log, the sigh of wind slipping through a gap you missed. Your own breathing suddenly very present. You become aware that breathing slowly is not just calming but practical. Fast breaths pull more cold air into your lungs. Historians still argue whether people in these conditions slept as deeply as we imagine, or if winter sleep was lighter and more fragmented. Evidence suggests the latter. You feel it yourself. Every small noise nudges you back toward alertness. Your body seems unwilling to fully let go. At some point you drift off only to wake again, not knowing how much time has passed. Minutes, hours, darkness makes no promises. The fire is lower now, the room noticeably colder. You debate getting up. This internal debate becomes familiar quickly. Getting up costs warmth. Staying down risks losing too much heat. Eventually instinct wins. You sit up, the sudden exposure shocking enough to make you gasp. Cold air rushes under blankets that moments ago felt sufficient. You move stiffly to the hearth, feeding it wood with hands that fumble more than you expect. This is another reality check. Fine motor skills suffer in the cold. Even simple tasks require concentration. As the fire catches again, you feel a wash of relief that is almost emotional. Warmth is not just physical. It reassures. You stand there longer than necessary, absorbing it before returning to your bedding. Your movements are slower now, heavier. Fatigue deepens when layered with cold. Back under the blankets, you notice smells more clearly. Smoke clings to everything. Wool has its own scent, lanolin, and damp. Wood ash settles in your hair and on your skin. Winter cabins smelled strongly something modern. Retellings rarely emphasize. Bathing was infrequent in deep winter, partly from necessity, partly from fear of exposure. The smell became background noise, part of life. Sleep comes in uneven waves. You dream briefly, then surface again. The dreams are simple, repetitive. Walking, chopping, carrying. There is no colour, just motion. Some scholars suggest that limited sensory input and exhaustion shape the content of dreams in pre-modern life. You suspect they were right. Outside, the night continues its long vigil. You do not hear wolves, though popular imagination insists they should be there. In reality, wolves were often cautious around human dwellings. The more common nighttime companions were mice in the walls, owls calling distantly, trees shedding snow with a soft thud. You hear one such thump now and jolt awake, heart racing before reason catches up. This is the emotional shock of the first night. Your nervous system has not adjusted yet. Everything feels urgent. Even harmless sounds feel like threats until proven otherwise. At one point, you become aware of frost forming inside. A faint glitter on the wall where moisture from your breath has settled. This is a documented phenomenon. In extreme cold, cabins could develop interior frost that melted during the day and refroze each night. Living spaces slowly grew damp, then icy, then damp again. Comfort was never static. You pull your hat lower over your ears. Sleeping with a hat was common, practical, and unremarkable. Your nose is still cold, though. There is not much to be done about that. You tuck your face partly under a blanket, breathing warm air back toward yourself, creating a small pocket of relative comfort. Eventually, exhaustion outweighs vigilance. You sink deeper into sleep, not peaceful exactly, but functional. This is sleep as survival, not luxury. Your body learns quickly that rest, even imperfect rest, is better than none. By the time you wake again, the fire has burned down once more. The cabin is quiet, dark, and very cold. But something has changed. The shock has softened. You're still uncomfortable, but no longer surprised. The first night has taught you its lesson. You lie there, breathing slowly, realizing that this rhythm will repeat. Wake attend fire, sleep wake again. Endless winter nights do not pass. They accumulate. And now, having endured the first one, you understand that tomorrow night will not be easier, just more familiar. By the time the next stretch of night arrives, you're no longer thinking only about the cold. Your attention turns outward toward the cabin itself, as if understanding its body might help you understand your own place within it. You sit quietly, fire low, and really look at the walls for the first time. Not just as barriers, but as objects made by hands that once ached the way yours do now. The logs are uneven, each one a little different in width and shape. You can see where they were notched to fit together a simple saddle or V-cut that locks them into place. This method was common across much of Northern Europe and North America. It allowed builders to raise walls quickly without nails, which were expensive and often reused. That is a mainstream historical fact supported by surviving cabins and written accounts. As you trace a notch with your fingers, you feel the logic of it. The logs lean on each other, sharing the load. Between them you notice chinking, mud mixed with straw, sometimes moss, sometimes animal hair. The mixture dries hard, sealing gaps against wind. Historians still argue whether moss was chosen primarily for insulation, or simply because it was abundant and free. Either way, you notice small cracks where the seal has shrunk or fallen away. Those are the places where the cabin breathes whether you want it to or not. You press your palm flat against the wall. The wood is cold, but not as cold as stone would be. There is a faint sense of stored warmth near the hearth side, a memory of the fire that burned earlier. Wood holds heat differently, releasing it slowly. That is part of why log cabins worked at all in these climates. Still, you can feel the winter pushing back from the outside patient and tireless. The craftsmanship is practical rather than elegant. There is no decoration beyond what the material itself provides. Tool marks remain visible. Axe strokes overlap in shallow arcs. A quirky but documented detail is that some builders intentionally left axe marks unpolished, believing smooth surfaces made logs more likely to crack in severe cold. Whether that belief was accurate is still debated, but the marks remain a frozen record of labour. You notice the ceiling low enough that smoke once lingered there before chimneys became common. Early cabins often relied on smoke holes or crude flues, meaning the interior was perpetually smoky. Even now, with a proper chimney soot, stains darken the upper logs. You smell it every time the fire is lit. Smoke is not just an inconvenience. It is a preservative discouraging insects and rot. It also coats your lungs and clothes, something people of the past accepted as normal. The floor is packed earth or rough planks. Either way, it is cold. You understand now why rugs, hides, or even scattered straw mattered. Insulation was not just about walls and roofs. Heat leaks downward relentlessly. You shift your weight, mindful of where you stand, keeping closer to the fire even as you study the room. Windows, if present, are small and poorly sealed. Glass panes were rare before the 19th century in many frontier regions. Instead, people used greased paper, oiled cloth, or thin slices of horn. Light filtered through, but heat escaped just as easily. You touch the frame and feel a faint draft. It carries the smell of snow and trees, reminding you how thin the boundary really is. There is a psychological effect to this closeness with the outside. You're not sealed off, you're tucked in loosely. The cabin creaks as temperatures drop, logs contracting and shifting slightly. The sound is subtle but constant. It reminds you that the structure is alive in its own way, responding to the same cold that stiffens your joints. Some scholars suggest that this intimate awareness of one's shelter created a different relationship to space. You do not take the cabin for granted. You monitor it. You listen for changes. A new creak might mean a settling log or the weight of snow on the roof. You file these sounds away, learning their meanings over time. The roof itself is simple, often made of hand-split shingles or even sod in some regions. Sod roofs added insulation but required constant maintenance. They could leak when thaw came soaking bedding and floors. You glance upward, imagining the weight above you now. Snow piles quietly layer upon layer, pressing down. The roof holds for now. You sit back down closer to the hearth again, feeling a growing respect for the builders. They did not create a fortress. They created something just sufficient. That sufficiency is humbling. Modern buildings hide their compromises behind drywall and insulation ratings. This cabin wears its compromises openly. There is a quiet comfort in that honesty. You know where the weak points are. You know where to add more chinking when the weather allows. You know which corner stays coldest. Over time, this knowledge becomes second nature. You stop fighting the cabin and start cooperating with it. A fringe historical tidbit suggests that some settlers spoke to their cabins, especially when alone for long periods. Whether this was superstition, loneliness, or simple habit is unclear. Historians still debate how widespread such practices were. Sitting here now, listening to the walls respond to the night, you can understand the impulse. The cabin feels like a companion, one that demands respect. As the fire dies down again, you feel the cold seep from the walls inward. You adjust your position, angling your body to minimize exposure. Even this becomes a skill. You learn how to sit, stand, and lie in ways that conserve heat. When you finally prepare to sleep, you do so with a new awareness. The walls around you are not just scenery, they are the reason you can sleep at all. Imperfect, drafty, and demanding, they hold back enough winter to make rest possible. You settle down back against the bedding eyes drifting closed. The cabin creaks once more as the temperature drops another notch. This time the sound does not startle you. It reassures you. The structure is doing its work, flexing and holding just as you are. As sleep begins to take you, you carry this understanding with you. Survival here is not about domination. It is about balance. Wood against cold, fire against dark, body against night. And for now, the balance holds. The fire becomes the center of everything now. Not just the room, but your thinking. You notice how your body orients toward it without conscious effort. Shoulders angled, feet tucked closer, palms extended when the chill creeps in. Firelight flickers across the logs, softening their roughness, rounding edges that looked harsh in daylight. In this moving light, the cabin feels less rigid, almost forgiving. You understand quickly that the hearth is not a background feature. It is a responsibility. Historical household records frequently mention fire tending as one of the most constant winter tasks, more frequent than cooking, more demanding than cleaning. A fire left too low risks freezing. A fire built too high risks sparks, smoke, or worse. Balance is everything. You crouch near the hearth, nudging embers together, listening for that low, satisfied sound as they catch on fresh wood. The smell shifts slightly, sharp resin, warm ash, a hint of smoke that clings to your clothes and hair whether you want it to or not. This scent will follow you even into sleep, embedding itself in blankets and skin. Firelight changes time. Without clocks, people judged hours by the behavior of flames and coals. You find yourself doing the same. Bright flame feels like evening. Dull glow suggests deep night. Pale ash hints at morning, though morning is still far away. This way of measuring time feels strangely intuitive, as if your body recognizes it from somewhere older. There is an overlooked detail in winter cabin life that many modern retellings miss. Firewood was not just fuel. It was labor stored in advance. Each log represents effort spent months earlier, cut and split under warmer skies. You feel that history in your hands now. Burning wood too quickly feels like wasting past energy. Burning it too slowly risks future misery. The calculation is constant, even as you grow tired. You sit back and let the fire do its work, but you do not relax completely. Your eyes keep returning to it, checking flame height, listening for changes. This vigilance is not anxiety, it is habit forming. In cold climates, inattentive fires killed people as surely as storms did. Entire cabins were lost overnight when flames climbed or smoke thickened silently. At the same time, the hearth is comforting in a way few other things are. Fire creates a sense of enclosure. Shadows retreat from its reach. The world shrinks to a circle of warmth, a manageable radius where your body can unclench slightly. Outside that circle, winter still waits, but for now it holds. Some period letters describe people talking to their fires, thanking them, coaxing them, scolding them when they smoke too much. Whether this was literal belief or simply anthropomorphic habit is unclear. Opinions among researchers differ. Sitting here alone, listening to the crackle, you understand how easily a fire becomes something more than a tool. You prepare for sleep with the fire in mind, not too high or sparks could leap, not too low or the room will drop below tolerable temperatures before morning. You arrange logs carefully favouring thicker pieces that burn slowly. This is a skill learned through trial error and uncomfortable nights. When you finally lie down, the fire remains in your awareness. Even with eyes closed, you sense its presence. You feel when it flares. You feel when it fades. Your sleep adjusts around it shallow enough that a sudden silence will wake you. The sound of burning wood becomes a lullaby of sorts. Crack, pop, soft collapse. Each noise tells a story, moisture escaping, bark curling away, air shifting as heat rises. Over time you learn to interpret these sounds without fully waking. A sharp crack might mean a log settling. A hiss could signal damp wood. A sudden absence of sound might mean the fire is failing. Academic discussions about pre-industrial sleep often emphasize this fragmented pattern. Instead of one long uninterrupted rest, people experience cycles of sleeping and waking, especially in winter. The hearth was a major reason. Fire demanded attention, and attention shaped sleep. You live that reality now, your rest threaded with brief moments of alertness. At one point you wake enough to feed the fire again. Your movements are practiced already, even after only a few nights. You do not think much. You act. Add wood. Adjust embers. Stand close for warmth. Return to bedding. The sequence feels ritualistic, grounding. The fire also affects how the cabin smells through the night. Smoke thickens when drafts shift. Ash dust settles, invisibly coating surfaces. By morning your throat feels slightly dry, your eyes a bit gritty. This was accepted as normal. People did not have a concept of indoor air quality as we do now. Comfort was measured differently. There is a strange intimacy in sharing your nights with a fire. It responds to your care. It reflects your fatigue. When you're too tired to tend it properly, it falters. When you overcompensate, it flares. This feedback loop teaches patience. As the night deepens, the fire becomes quieter, more subdued. Embers glow like distant stars, steady and contained. The room cools gradually, not all at once. You adjust blankets, pull them higher. Tuck hands in close to your chest. Your breathing slows. Outside wind presses against the cabin again, but the fire holds its ground. Heat radiates outward, meeting cold halfway. For now, the balance remains. Before sleep fully claims you, you think briefly about how much of human history revolved around this simple exchange. Wood for warmth, attention for survival. Night after night, winter after winter. Fire was never optional. It was life itself contained in a fragile ring of stone and iron. You drift off again, the glow behind your eyelids warm and steady. Even as consciousness fades, some part of you keeps listening, tuned to the quiet language of embers. The fire watches the night with you, and together you wait for morning. When you finally turn your attention fully towards sleep, you realize how much preparation it requires. This is not the casual act of lying down and drifting off. Bedding here is a system layered and adjusted with care. You kneel beside it, hands already stiff, and make small changes that feel surprisingly important. The base is rough. Maybe straw packed into a ticking, maybe flattened reeds, maybe just boards softened by a thin layer of hides. Surviving household inventories from the 18th century often list straw mattresses as standard replaced or refreshed seasonally. The straw shifts under your weight, rustling softly, releasing a dry, dusty smell. It is not unpleasant, but it is not neutral either. Everything in this cabin has a scent. On top come the blankets, wool first, heavy and coarse, holding warmth even when slightly damp. Wool was prized in cold climates because it retained insulating properties, better than many alternatives. That detail appears again and again in letters and trade records. You notice how the blanket scratches faintly at your neck or a binder, that comfort and utility were not the same thing. Then come furs if you have them. Deer, bear, maybe smaller animals stitched together. They smell faintly musky, a lingering trace of the animal they once were. An unusual but recorded practice was sleeping fur side down in extreme cold, placing the hide directly against the body for maximum insulation. Not everyone agreed this was best. Some believed it trapped moisture too close to the skin. The question never fully settled. You hesitate, then arrange the furs on top instead. This feels safer somehow, more familiar. You smooth them out, noticing stiff spots where fat once soaked in now hardened by cold. These furs are not decorative. They are functional, heavy enough that you feel anchored when they settle over you. You remove outer layers slowly. Boots come off last place close to the fire, but not too close. Frozen boots are a nightmare in the morning. People learned quickly to position footwear where it might thaw slightly overnight without scorching. Socks stay on. Everything stays on, really. Sleeping unclothed in winter cabins was rare and risky. You keep your hat on. A soft cap pulled low over ears and forehead. Body heat escapes quickly through the head, and this was widely understood long before modern explanations. Even now you feel the difference immediately when the hat is in place. Your thoughts slow just a little. You lie down, carefully testing the bedding-shifting weight to find the least uncomfortable position. The floor radiates cold upward. You feel it through layers, a constant reminder that gravity works against you. People often slept slightly elevated on platforms or benches to escape this. If you have one, you appreciate it deeply. As you settle, you become aware of how your body feels after days of cold. Muscles ache in a dull, persistent way. Fingers feel thick. Toes throb faintly as circulation adjusts. This discomfort is not dramatic, but it is constant. It shapes how you sleep, keeping you from sinking too deeply at first. There is a curious historical note that some settlers slept sitting up or semi-reclined during the coldest nights, believing it improved breathing and warmth. Whether this was effective or simply a coping belief remains uncertain. You try propping yourself slightly, then decide against it. Lying flat feels better tonight. You pull the coverings tight, tucking edges under your body to seal in heat. This cocooning becomes second nature. Any gap invites cold. You learn to minimize exposed surface area instinctively. Your breathing grows slower as the small pocket of warmth builds around you. Sleep approaches, but it is cautious. You do not surrender fully. The fire is still there, low but present, and part of your awareness stays tuned to it. You notice how the light shifts even through closed eyelids, embers pulsing faintly. Each pulse feels like a heartbeat for the room. Smell intensifies in this stillness. Smoke, wool, fur, your own skin unwashed for days. Hygiene in winter was minimal. Washing exposed skin to cold air risked frostbite and illness. Many people simply did not bathe until spring. This is mentioned quietly in domestic accounts without judgment. It was necessity. You adjust again, pulling a blanket higher over your mouth, breathing into it. The fabric warms, dampens slightly. This creates a small, humid space that feels protective. It also freezes overnight, something you will discover later. For now, it helps. Your thoughts wander briefly. You think about how sleep itself was understood differently. People did not expect perfect rest. Waking in the night was normal. Some used that time to pray, mend, or simply sit by the fire. Night was not a single block, but a series of phases. You're beginning to feel that rhythm. A faint sound reaches you. A mouse in the wall, perhaps, scratching, pausing, moving again. Rodents were constant companions in cabins drawn by warmth and stored food. This is mentioned matter-of-factly in many journals. You tense, then relax. The sound is small, persistent, but not threatening. You drift off at last, slipping into a shallow sleep. Dreams come quickly but lightly. They are fragmented. Images without narrative. Snow falling, fire glowing, hands working wood. Your mind seems to replay the elements of your day stripped of detail. You wake again, unsure why. The room is darker now. The fire has dimmed further. Cold presses in more insistently. You stay still for a moment, assessing. This becomes another habit. Do you get up or do you wait? You test the air with a slow breath. It is cold but tolerable. You stay down, pull blankets tighter, curl slightly, knees drawn up. This posture conserves heat. It also feels instinctive, almost animal. Many animals sleep curled for this reason. Humans do too when stripped of excess comfort. Gradually your body accepts this state. Tension eases, muscles loosen just enough. You sink deeper into sleep, not luxurious but sufficient. This is rest adapted to circumstance. Before consciousness fades completely, you have a small passing thought that this bed, rough as it is, represents safety. Out there beyond the walls, winter offers no such concession. Inside, layered in wool and fur with fire nearby, you are protected enough. The thought settles you. Sleep thickens. The cabin holds steady around you. Logs creak softly as temperatures shift. The night continues long and quiet, and you drift with it, wrapped in the careful arrangement that makes survival possible until morning. You grow accustomed to the way night presses against the cabin, but nothing quite prepares you for the sounds that gather outside once the world settles fully into darkness. It is not silence at all. It is a shifting chorus, subtle at first, then strangely textured as your ears adjust. You lie there half awake, half wrapped in the warmth you've managed to trap beneath blankets and furs, and the cabin becomes a resonant chamber for every noise carried on the wind. The first sound you notice is the wind itself, not the dramatic howl that appears in movies, but a low, steady sighing that scrapes through bare branches. It moves in pulses, softening and swelling like breathing. Sometimes it blows across the roof in long strokes, as if smoothing the snow that rests there. Travellers' journals from the Northern Territories often describe this exact kind of wind, calling it sweeping, wandering, even thoughtful in its persistence. You hear what they meant. It is not threatening. It is patient. Then you hear the trees. Tall pines and leafless hardwoods shift under their own weight. Frost makes the branches brittle, so when they rub against each other they produce a wooden groan, the sound deep and almost conversational. A curious observation recorded by early settlers notes that trees in deep cold can pop loudly when sap freezes. You listen for it now, wondering if you will catch the sudden crack. It comes eventually sharp and quick, startling enough that your breath pauses for a heartbeat. Somewhere farther off an animal moves. You cannot see it, but you feel the subtle vibration of snow being displaced. Slow steps, then a pause. Perhaps a deer, perhaps something smaller, a fox hunting for rodents under the snow. Tracks would tell you more in daylight. For now you imagine the creature's outline moving through the forest, its breath forming little ghosts in the cold air. The uncertainty of nighttime sounds did more than unsettle people of the past. It shaped how they understood their surroundings. Without artificial noise to drown things out, every creak or rustle took on meaning. Many families developed their own mental maps of sounds, knowing which belonged to animals, which were cabin noises, and which required attention. Modern studies of rural life confirm this acoustic awareness. You are developing it now instinctively. A soft tapping reaches your ear, rhythmic but irregular. At first you think it might be a loose shutter, but the cabin has none. Then you realize it is snow shedding from a higher branch and hitting the outer wall. Snow can fall at night without wind collapsing in clumps under its own weight. The sound is gentle but distinct. It makes you imagine the roofline buried deeper by morning. Your mind, half fogged by sleep, begins connecting the noises into patterns. It is almost like listening to a story being told in another language. A shifting of logs overhead signals the structure reacting to colder temperatures. The roof beams tighten slightly, making a muted thump. This is normal. Builders knew wood shrinks in cold. They chose materials accordingly. The sound reassures you that the cabin is behaving as it should. You hear a faint scraping inside the wall, a small guest. Likely a mouse searching for warmth or crumbs. Early homestead notes mention that winter mice were both a nuisance and an odd comfort. Their presence meant warmth was sufficient for life. You try not to think about it too much. The tiny creature continues working, then pauses, then resumes with quiet determination. Beneath all of this, there is a deeper hum, not quite sound, more like a feeling in the bones of the cabin. Structures under stress produce micro-vibrations, something modern builders can measure, but which people of the past sensed intuitively. This underlying presence makes you feel less alone, as if the cabin itself is awake with you participating in the long night. As you listen, you become aware of your own sounds. Your breathing steadies. Breath leaves your body with a faint crackle where warm air meets cold. Your heartbeat thumps softly in your ears. The rustle of blankets accompanies even the smallest adjustment of position. These personal noises become part of the nighttime landscape, a counterpoint to the world outside. Your thoughts wander toward how people explain these sounds long ago. Folklore collected from winter settlements often refers to spirits wandering the forest, or ancestors whispering through trees. Whether such beliefs were literal or metaphorical is still open to interpretation. Many researchers think these stories helped people cope with the psychological strain of isolation. Listening now, you understand how easily imagination fills gaps in the dark. There is an odd rustling above you, followed by a quick little scramble. Perhaps a pine marten or squirrel venturing onto the roof. Animals sometimes sheltered briefly under the protective overhang. The snow muffles their steps, making them sound softer than they are. You picture small paws pressing into the drifts, sending tiny showers of snow dust drifting down the shingles. The wind picks up again, shifting direction. Its tone changes, becoming sharper as it threads through a new gap. Cold air brushes across your cheek. You instinctively pull the blanket higher, sealing the edge more securely. You feel the difference immediately. Every tiny airflow matters in winter cabins. People learn to repair drafty spots often, though some drafts never fully disappeared. Your mind drifts towards sleep, but the sounds keep nudging you at the edge of awareness. This is not disturbing, it is part of the rhythm. Nighttime was rarely quiet enough for uninterrupted rest. You listen half dreaming. The crack of ice forming on branches becomes in your mind footsteps. The sigh of wind becomes a voice. This blending is common during the winter months mentioned in both folklore and practical accounts. The boundary between waking perception and imagination thins. A louder noise snaps you briefly awake. Snow sliding from the roof in a heavy sheet. It lands with a muffled thud, shaking the cabin slightly. You startle, heart quickening before recognizing it. Snow does this especially when the fire has warmed the interior walls. Heat radiates outward, loosening the bond between roof and accumulated snow. The result is sudden and dramatic. People used to treat it as normal night punctuation. You lie still afterward, letting your breathing return to normal. The cabin settles again. The forest resumes its slow chorus. A lesser-known detail from old letters mentions that some people found the night sounds comforting after enough winters, even preferring them to summer silence. The predictability of these winter noises became a kind of reassurance. You can already imagine that happening. These sounds tell you the world is working as it should. Your senses grow heavy. The fire has dwindled to embers again, giving the room a faint reddish pulse. Shadows deepen. The air cools. But the sounds outside continue steady, cyclical, anchoring you. As you drift towards sleep, you breathe slowly, timing your breaths with the sway of wind, letting each small sound blend into the next. Outside, the winter night goes on unhurried, vast and full of life you rarely see. Inside, wrapped against the cold, you listen until listening becomes dreaming, and dreaming slips quietly into sleep. Night stretches longer than you expect. It feels drawn out, as if time itself thickens in the cold, slowing your sense of hours passing. You lie there beneath layers of wool and fur, eyes half open, aware of the fire's faint glow and the vast darkness outside. The feeling is not suspense, not fear, just an odd elasticity in the way moments expand. You begin to understand why people in earlier centuries often spoke of winter nights as seasons within seasons, each one distinct from the last. Your perception of time changes first. Without clocks, without steady artificial light, the markers you rely on become internal. Your body responds to darkness with drowsiness, then alertness, then drowsiness again. Many personal diaries from the colder regions describe how winter nights seem to contain two separate sleeps, broken by a quiet waking in the middle. You start to sense that pattern forming in yourself, a rhythm rising from somewhere deeper than habit. Your thoughts slow, becoming softer around the edges. You notice how the fire's pulse seems to influence your sense of passing hours. When flames flare, moments feel brighter. When embers dim, minutes stretch. It is as if the fire is a primitive clock, not measuring time precisely, but set in a mood your body responds to in ways you cannot fully articulate. There is a small, curious detail preserved in letters from early homesteaders. Some wrote that winter nights felt long enough to think every thought twice. You understand this now. In the darkness, with no tasks to distract you, the mind circles its own ideas, revisiting memories from the day, imagining tomorrow's chores, drifting into daydreams that resemble early-stage dreams. As you lie quietly half awake, you begin counting breaths without meaning to. Your breath creates a tiny cloud of vapor each time you exhale. You watch it rise again. The cabin becomes a slow, repeating pattern of breath flame and creaking wood. Each one marks the flow of time more reliably than anything you brought with you. You roll slightly, trying to find a new comfortable position. Each motion is deliberate because warmth escapes with every adjustment. Your shoulder shifts, then your hips. The blankets rustle. A faint draft kisses your cheek before the bedding settles again. This simple act makes minutes feel longer. You focus on maintaining the cocoon you've created. Outside, the world moves even more slowly. Snow settles layer by layer. Trees hold their breath between gusts of wind. Animals move carefully, conserving energy. Winter enforces patience. Early explorers often mentioned that the season felt like a teacher of slowness, forcing people to match its pace. You feel that now, absorbing its lesson without trying. Your mind drifts. You think about how long the night has already been. You think about how long it will continue. You accept that you cannot rush it. This acceptance feels surprisingly peaceful. When you finally close your eyes again, you let your thoughts float rather than resist them. Interpretations among researchers vary on how people of the past psychologically adapted to these extended nights. Some believe they developed a kind of seasonal meditative state shaped by monotony and low stimulation. Others argue the experience was far more stressful, causing restlessness and anxiety. Listening to your own mind now drifting between alertness and half-dreaming, you suspect the truth lies somewhere in the middle. A gust of wind pushes against the cabin, making the logs flex slightly. This sound nudges you awake, but only just. You open your eyes halfway. Shadows glide across the ceiling where the embers flicker. Time feels suspended, as if you are looking at a painting that sometimes moves. You recall a practice mentioned occasionally in settler memoirs. People would talk or whisper quietly during these awake moments, sharing stories or praying, or simply acknowledging each other's presence. If you are not alone, these long stretches might feel communal. Instead, you sit in the shared company of the cabin itself, each crack and sigh a substitute for another human voice. The quiet is not empty, it is layered. Your hearing becomes sharper as your vision fades into darkness. You notice the tiny ticking sound that cooling wood makes. You sense the faint movement of air travelling from floor to ceiling. Even your heartbeat seems louder. Winter nights amplify small things, making them feel important. You drift again toward the edge of sleep. Dreams approach slowly, forming like mist rather than solid images. They are not vivid yet. They hover, shaped by sounds in the room, by the cold against your nose, by the fire's glow pulsing behind your eyelids. At times time feels so stretched that you wonder if dawn will ever return. Travellers from centuries past often described the deep winter nights as endless or bottomless words that appear again and again in handwritten journals. You feel the weight of that description now, but there is no panic in it, just a deep, slow sensation like floating in dark water. Your breathing deepens. The mattress beneath you feels softer now, not because it has changed, but because fatigue has finally smoothed its rough edges. Your hands relax. Your toes curl slightly inside your socks, gathering what warmth they can. Your thoughts begin to loosen from sense and memory. You drift into a half-dream where the sound of wind becomes a whispering conversation and the fire's crackle becomes footsteps on snow. These moments are neither fully dream nor fully conscious. They belong to the strange in-between state that winter nights create so easily. Time does not move in a straight line here. It loops, swells, contracts. The long darkness teaches you patience in a way no lecture or essay ever could. You learn simply by lying here listening to the world and your own body speak to each other. At last, a subtle shift in the air tells you that hours have passed. The fire is almost gone. The cold has returned to reclaim its space. You wake enough to notice. You sit up slowly, reluctantly, and tend the fire again. This gives you a momentary anchor, something tangible to do in the drifting river of the night. When you lie back down, the sense of stretched time remains, but now it feels familiar. You settle into it more easily. The night continues deep and vast, and you float through it one slow breath at a time. You become aware as the night deepens of your own breathing in a way you rarely notice in ordinary life. Each exhale rises in a fragile plume pale against the darkness, then dissolves before it reaches the ceiling. The cold transforms your breath into something visible, something you can almost touch. It feels strangely intimate to watch it appear and fade as if your body is sketching brief ghostly shapes inside the cabin. Moisture gathers on the inside of the walls. You see it when you lift your head, little pinpricks of frost glinting faintly in the ember glow. This is not unusual. Accounts from northern homesteads often describe how cabins seem to grow their own winter on the interior frosting over in ribbons and crystal webs. The warmth from human breath mixed with the lingering smoke and cold wood created patterns that changed nightly like delicate drawings that vanished each morning. You shift slightly beneath the blankets and feel a tightening chill wherever the air touches your skin. The breath that once warmed your face now condenses along the fabric near your mouth, leaving it slightly damp. If you touch it, it feels cool, even crisp along the edges. People living in these harsh climates accepted this as part of the routine. Bedding often froze lightly on the surface by dawn. A small detail preserved in a Norwegian winter diary notes that travellers sometimes shook frost off their blankets the way one might dust flour from bread. You lie still and exhale again. The little cloud rises. The faintest shimmer clings to your eyelashes. This interior climate becomes familiar quickly, though it is far from comfortable. The cabin breathes with you. Every human inside contributes moisture that clings to the logs, the ceiling, the bedding. Extended winters meant living inside a slow cycle of dampness and freezing, even when the fire was kept strong. Your attention drifts to the hearth where embers glow softly. Their heat is uneven, reaching you in gentle waves. The space between the fire and your bed holds a gradient of temperatures each step, away from the flames, dropping several degrees. It makes the room feel carved into climates warm near the hearth, cold at the edges, freezing near the walls. You watch your breath again, fascinated by how persistent it is. Each exhalation is a little marker of life, a small moment of proof that you are still warm enough to create mist. In early medical writings from Northern Europe, observers sometimes noted that breath lingering too long near the mouth was considered a possible sign of ill health. Whether this was accurate or superstition is uncertain. Modern researchers remain divided on the interpretation, though many believe it was an early attempt to diagnose respiratory strain based on visible vapour. You adjust your position again, pulling the blankets higher as a draft brushes your cheek. The higher you cover your face, the more your breath gathers in the small pocket of warmth, creating a tiny self-made atmosphere. It is comforting at first, but you understand already that too much moisture trapped this way can freeze by morning. It is a balance you learn with experience and nightly negotiation between warmth and dampness. As you lie there, your breathing merges with the rhythm of the cabin. Logs creak as they contract. Frost quivers along the seams where air sneaks through. Each breath feels audible, though it is not loud. It simply resonates more in the stillness. You're aware of the shape of your lungs, the movement of your ribs. Winter reduces you to essential functions. You inhale, you exhale, you continue. You recall reading somewhere that people who lived in such conditions learned to control their breathing without consciously trying. They breathed slower to conserve warmth. They breathed deeper to calm themselves when the night seemed too long. You find yourself doing both. The cold encourages measured breaths softer and more deliberate. In this state, you begin to notice how the frost forms on different surfaces. On the wall beside you, the crystals arrange themselves into branching shapes like tiny ferns or feathers. These patterns were often admired by settlers who noted them in letters and journals with a kind of quiet wonder. One cabin record even describes a family tracing the shapes with charcoal in the morning, trying to capture their brief beauty before they melted. The roof above you glitters faintly where your breath has risen throughout the night. Light moisture collects along the beams, freezing instantly. The effect is subtle, but in the firelight it resembles a thin dusting of stars. You imagine ancient people looking up at similar patterns, perhaps creating stories to explain them. Some oral traditions from cold regions suggest that interior frost was believed to hold messages from winter spirits or to predict weather shifts. Whether literal belief or poetic metaphor, these traditions reveal how deeply people observe their surroundings during long winters. Your breath continues rising, slow, steady. You begin to fall into a rhythm. Each exhale leaves the body gently, barely audible. Each inhale brings in air that is sharper, colder, but still tolerable thanks to the layers around you. This pattern becomes hypnotic, lulling you closer to sleep. A slight change in temperature reaches you when the fire drops again. The cabin cools instantly. Your breath turns thicker, more pronounced. You sit up reluctantly, preparing to tend the fire once more. As you do, a small cloud of frost shakes loose from your blanket, drifting into the dim air. You notice how the frost melts faster near the fire. You add a log, carefully adjusting the embers until the flame returns with a soft roar. Warmth spreads outward again, dissolving the thin crystals at the foot of your bedding. It feels like resetting the cabin's internal weather. When you lie back down, breath fogs the air above you once more. But now the frost patterns have softened the room slightly warmer, the cold slightly less sharp. These small changes matter. Winter is made bearable by increments, not by grand victories. You watch your breath one last time before your eyes grow heavy again. The mist rises, dissolves, rises again, like snowfall in reverse. The rhythm carries you gently back towards sleep. You wake to the muted stiffness of clothing that never truly dries. Even though you're still wrapped in blankets, you can feel the slight dampness in the fibers of what you're wearing, the cold seeping into them during the night and refusing to let go. When you sit up, your shirt clings to your back, in places stiff in others. Wool absorbs moisture slowly, but it releases it even more reluctantly. In winter cabins, this was simply the way of things. Accounts from remote settlements describe clothing as always nearly dry, but never quite a condition you now understand with reluctant clarity. You stretch your arms, feeling the fabric pull awkwardly. Your sleeves smell faintly of smoke sweat and damp wool. These scents become so familiar that you hardly notice them after a while. Yet in the dim light of morning or late night they feel sharper. You look toward the hearth. The fire is low, again embers barely alive. You realize the warmth you felt earlier came mostly from your own body trapped beneath layers, not from the room itself. Your clothing has spent the entire night in the chill air. Even with the fire nearby, heat never spreads evenly in a cabin like this. Warmth rises straight upward, leaving the lower parts of the room cold and unforgiving. The result is clothing that absorbs the ambient cold and holds it against your skin. Travellers from the northern frontiers frequently mention this uncomfortable truth, noting that garments often felt colder upon waking than the air itself. You move toward the hearth, each step making your clothing shift with a soft crackle. You can feel the stiffness most where the fabric absorbed melting snow the previous day. Moisture has settled deep into the weave, and the cold has made it rigid. You reach the fire kneel and begin the familiar ceremony of coaxing it back to life. This time the heat feels sharper on your hands, as if your skin must thaw before it can truly warm. As the flames rise, you open your palms toward them. The warmth begins to travel slowly through the fabric, softening the stiffer areas, loosening fibres gently. It takes longer than expected. Many early homesteads used drying racks suspended near the hearth to warm garments overnight, but even those didn't always guarantee dryness. You do not have such a rack here, or perhaps you do, but it was already cluttered with other necessities. In these cabins, everything needed drying. A peculiar detail recorded in several frontier letters suggests that people often slept in layers that smelled of smoke, not because they enjoyed the scent, but because smoke acted as a natural insect deterrent. This may or may not have been effective, but the idea persisted. Whether practical or not, the result is undeniable. Your clothing holds the scent of every fire you've lit. You lift your coat from where it lay near the hearth. The side closest to the fire feels almost warm, but the side facing the room remains cold, bordering on icy. You flip it, letting the other side absorb heat. This simple task feels strangely luxurious, as if you're pampering yourself. Early travellers wrote about drying clothing piece by piece, turning each item slowly, patiently, because rushing meant burning fabric or creating uneven warmth that only worsened discomfort later. When you put the coat on, the warmth is uneven but welcome. It settles around your shoulders like a temporary promise. You know it will fade quickly once you move away from the fire. Still, you savour it while it lasts. Your socks are another matter. They have absorbed sweat and melted snow, and now they cling unpleasantly to your feet. In extreme cold, socks frozen stiff were not uncommon. Families often placed them under blankets or near sleeping bodies so they wouldn't harden by morning. You remove yours grimacing as the fabric peels away from your skin. They feel damp at the toes, stiff at the heel, slightly scratchy throughout. You hold them near the fire, but not too close. Too much heat will scorch them or trap the smell. You begin rotating them slowly, feeling the fibres loosen. Drying socks is tedious, but it is also essential. Cold, damp feet were more than discomfort. They were a risk. In winter logs, illness often began with chilled extremities creeping upward into deeper weariness. You consider removing your outer wool shirt as well, but the idea of exposing your torso to the cold makes you hesitate. Instead, you pull the fabric outward to let heat slip beneath it, hoping to warm the inside. It works, but only slightly. Clothing worn this long holds its own climate. The longer winter stretches, the more your garments become part of the cabin's rhythm, absorbing smoke moisture and the scent of many nights. Researchers studying textile fragments from early cabins note that garments often carried layers of atmospheric history, traces of ash, sweat, salts, and even resin from firewood. You don't need researchers to tell you this. You can smell the history on yourself right now. Every layer has a story embedded in it. You shift your legs and the movement reminds you that the inside of your pants is also cold. Even the seams feel stiff. During deep winter, many workers never fully dried their trousers, especially after walking through snow that reached their knees. Some even slept in them to avoid the agony of putting on frozen fabric in the morning. You understand that choice now, feeling the lingering chill along your legs. The fire grows brighter. You hold your hands out again, letting heat sink into your skin. Your clothing softens more fully now, becoming pliable enough to move comfortably. You take a slow breath, letting warmth spread to your face. Even your breath feels warmer, heavier. When you step back from the fire, the cold in the room greets you instantly. Your clothing begins to cool again. Not completely, not yet, but you feel the shift. This will repeat throughout the day and night, warming, cooling, stiffening, softening. Clothing in this environment is not static. It participates in the winter as actively as you do. You make your bed again, smoothing blankets, arranging furs, preparing for the next time you'll have to crawl beneath them. Your clothing rustles quietly with each motion. You touch the surface of your bedding and find a faint layer of frost where your breath collected earlier. You shake it lightly, watching ice crystals drift to the floor. Soon you will move outside again and the cycle will repeat. Snow will melt into your garments. Sweat will freeze. Wool will stiffen. The cabin will answer with its own cold. But for now, in this moment beside the fire, warmth reaches you just enough to feel like mercy. You sit down, clothing steaming faintly as the last dampness evaporates. Your breath rises in soft plumes. Your body settles, and you begin to feel once more the strange comfort of surviving winter one layer at a time. Sharing a winter cabin with other people changes the rhythm of the night in ways you feel immediately. The space is small to begin with, barely large enough for a table, a hearth, and a few bundles of supplies. Once multiple bodies occupy it, the air takes on a different weight. You feel the warmth more strongly, but you also sense the nearness of every breath, every shift in position, every small sound made by someone trying to get comfortable. You settle back down onto your bedding and notice how the temperature is different from nights spent alone. Human bodies generate heat, and in a cabin sealed as best as possible against the cold, that warmth becomes a shared resource. Old records from isolated settlements describe winter sleeping arrangements as cooperative warmth, a phrase that makes perfect sense now. Each person, simply by existing in that narrow space, helps the group survive the long stretch of frozen darkness. Someone stirs nearby, a soft grunt, a rustle of blankets. The floor creaks slightly as weight shifts. These are not alarming sounds, but they remind you that privacy is a modern luxury. For people of the past, winter living often meant surrendering the idea of personal space. Families slept shoulder to shoulder, sometimes even sharing blankets or furs. This wasn't sentimental closeness. It was practical survival. In one corner a faint cough echoes. You glance toward the sound, half awake. Early cabin letters often mention the discomfort of hearing every small noise made by others throughout the night. Yet those same letters also speak of comfort in numbers. The presence of others meant that fire tending could be shared, that emergencies would not go unnoticed, and that the cold would have a harder time claiming the room entirely. Your own breathing falls into rhythm with the breathing around you. The combined sound becomes a kind of soft tide, rising and falling, filling the room with gentle pulses. You feel yourself relaxing into it. There is a strange solidarity in shared nighttime breathing. Even without speaking, you understand each other's exhaustion and determination. You notice that the fire has dimmed again. Someone across the room sits up quietly, perhaps feeling the chill before you do. Their silhouette moves toward the hearth. A log is added. Embers stir. The faint glow brightens. For a moment you see the features of the others more clearly, a face lined by cold and fatigue, eyes half closed with sleep. Then the flame calms, shadows return, and the room drifts back into peaceful dimness. This shared maintenance of fire was a fundamental part of winter life. Several frontier diaries remark that night duties rotated naturally, never formally assigned. Those who woke first tended the flame and no one complained. Everyone understood that warmth belonged to the group. You find comfort in this unspoken agreement, even though your companions tonight exist only in your imagination. A surprising observation in one settler's memoir notes that people often slept in layers, arranging themselves so that those most vulnerable to cold were placed in the warmest spots. Children elders, or those recovering from illness, often slept closest to the hearth, or between others to conserve heat. The arrangement changed as needed depending on health age and the severity of the night. You picture this now, shifting nests of blankets and bodies adapting each evening. You take a slow breath and feel how your chest expands against the confines of your clothing. The air is warmer here than it would be if you were alone. The presence of others creates a microclimate. Moisture builds faster too. Your breath mingles with theirs, forming a thicker humidity that will freeze along the walls by morning. You accept this, seeing it not as discomfort, but as evidence of shared endurance. There is an old story mentioned in a rural folktale collection about how families would whisper quietly to each other during the deepest part of the night. Not full conversations, just soft exchanges. Are you awake? Is the fire holding? Is the wind changing? The tale suggests these whispers were not about fear, but connection. The silence of winter could stretch so long that voices help remind people that they were not facing it alone. Whether the story is literal or exaggerated is uncertain, but the sentiment fits perfectly within the world of a crowded cabin. Someone nearby shifts again, pulling a blanket tighter. You hear the faint rasp of wool brushing against wood. Another person lets out a long, tired sigh. The sound makes you smile a little. Exhaustion becomes communal too. You imagine everyone waiting for the moment when sleep overtakes all of you at once, settling the room into stillness. The fire's glow brightens briefly, casting long shadows. The heat reaches you warm enough to soften the chill inside your bedding. You let your muscles relax. Your eyes fall half closed. You feel aware of everything and nothing at the same time. The breathing around you becomes a lullaby made of human presence rather than melody. You think briefly about how modern people often seek solitude to rest, while those who lived in earlier centuries often found their deepest rest in the closeness of others. Archaeological studies of one-room cabins note signs of shared bedding spaces confirming the common practice. You do not need a study to tell you how soothing this closeness can be. You feel it tonight, a gentle sense of belonging wrapped in blankets and flickering firelight. As the fire dims again, someone stirs once more but does not rise. Perhaps they believe someone else will tend the flame soon. You consider doing it yourself, but the warmth around you is strong enough that you hesitate. This is the quiet negotiation that happens in shared spaces. Who moves, who rests, who yields? There is no tension in it, only instinct. Eventually you force yourself to rise. You move slowly, careful not to disturb others. Your knees protest. The cold bites immediately. But you cross the short distance to the hearth and nudge the embers together. The flame rises again, gentle but steady. When you return to your place, someone shifts as if acknowledging your effort, though they may still be asleep. You settle back under your blankets and feel the renewed warmth creeping in. The breathing around you deepens. The cabin relaxes. You relax with it. Surviving winter like this becomes a shared act, a collective rhythm, a group heartbeat. You feel the truth of that now as the long night continues, softened by the bodies resting beside you. The deeper the night goes, the more you feel the responsibility of keeping the fire alive. It is not romantic work, not the kind you imagine from paintings or stories. It is repetitive, drowsy, sometimes irritating, and absolutely necessary. You wake because of a shift in the cold. Not even a noise, just a change in the air pressed against your face. The warmth that once lingered near your skin has thinned, replaced by a sharper edge that urges you back into alertness. You sit up slowly. Your joints feel stiff from hours curled in the same position. The blankets fall away and the cold crawls instantly across your shoulders like spilled water. You inhale sharply. Your breath hovers before you drifting upward in a faint cloud. Near the hearth, the fire has collapsed into a low bed of embers glowing faintly beneath a layer of ash. Keeping a winter cabin warm through the night was a full-time task shared by everyone who lived inside it. In many old journals, the phrase night watching the fire appears casually, not indicating a job but a habit. Those who happened to wake first tended the embers. Those who remained asleep simply benefited. The understanding was communal, instinctive. You crawl toward the hearth on your hands and knees, the floorboards cold enough to sting through your clothing. The embers pulse gently, faint red hearts waiting to be fed. You lean close and blow softly, coaxing air into the gaps. The glow brightens. Tiny sparks skitter across the ash. You place a thin stick on top. It smoulders, hesitates, then catches with a soft, reluctant flare. A thin curl of smoke rises. Your eyes sting slightly, the same way they always do when you lean too close. But it is comforting in its way, the reminder that the fire has not gone only sleeping. People of the past often spoke about embers as if they were alive, and sitting here now you understand that connection. Embers behave almost like an animal waking from rest, stretching its glow slowly toward new fuel. You add another piece of wood, thicker this time. The bark crackles as heat reaches it. For a moment nothing happens, then the flame reaches upward, flickering gently, gaining confidence. The room responds at once. Shadows shift. Heat creeps outward, subtle but noticeable. Your hands begin to thaw. Your face warms first, then your chest, then your legs. There is an old observation preserved in the travel writings of a northern trader. A fire does not warm a room. It warms a moment. That line feels accurate now. Warmth ebbs and flows with the flame's strength. There's no stable temperature, only waves of heat that pass briefly over your skin. You sit near the fire longer than you intend. It feels too good to leave immediately. Your mind drifts in the half-light, lulled by the gentle popping of the wood. You know you should return to your bedding soon, but you also know that moving away from the flame will shock your body with cold all over again. Behind you the others sleep in uneven piles of blankets. Their breathing forms a soft, steady chorus. Occasionally someone shifts or sighs or pulls a covering tighter. No one wakes fully. A faint snore rises from one corner. These small noises give the cabin life beyond the fire. They remind you that warmth is not the only thing shared in a winter night. Fatigue, dreams, and survival are shared too. You stand at last, moving slowly. Warm fabric against your skin begins to cool instantly. You feel the temperature difference like a pressure drop. The fire at your back already seems distant. You hurry, careful, not to stumble over someone's outstretched arm or the uneven bundles of bedding. Your place awaits you, still holding a whisper of warmth. When you slide beneath the layer again, you feel your body settle into them as if sinking into memory. The furs mold to your shoulders. The wool scratches faintly at your neck. The mattress rustles softly beneath you. The faint warmth of your earlier sleep slowly returns. Yet even as you settle, you know you will rise again before dawn. Nighttime fire tending is never a single task. It is a cycle. Fire builds fire, fades, cold creeps in someone wakes. Early cabin families accepted this with a matter-of-fact resilience. They expected broken sleep, rising and resting repeatedly. Modern expectations of unbroken rest simply did not apply. The fire continues behind your eyelids. You see its flicker even as your vision blurs with drowsiness. The air near your mouth is slightly warmer now. You pull your blankets tight to arrange the tiny envelope of heat around your body. It is delicate, easily disrupted. But when it forms properly, it becomes your own gentle shelter inside the larger one. Some historians examining domestic patterns in winter cabins have noted that people may have felt less alone at night, precisely because tending the fire linked them to everyone else sharing the cabin. Even unspoken, the act of rising to maintain the flame expressed care. It kept the group alive, it created trust. You feel that trust now, even if no one speaks. The fire glows, the others breathe, and you rest knowing that if you do not wake in time, someone else might. Or you will wake anyway, drawn by the same instinct that has guided generations. Your breathing slows again. Warmth gathers around you. The fire crackles softly in the background, steadying into a gentle rhythm. The long winter night continues, but you're no longer fighting it. You're participating in it, tending it, shaping it as it shapes you. Sleep comes again, not in a rush, but like a slow settling of snow, soft and patient, covering you with its quiet weight. Sleep eventually returns, but when it comes, it carries a different texture than anything you are used to. The cold shapes your dreams. The darkness shapes them. Even the rhythm of the fire influences what unfolds in your mind. Dreams here do not bloom gently. They creep in, slowly merging with waking sensations, until you can no longer tell where thought ends and dreaming begins. You lie curled in your bedding, eyes half shut, and awareness begins to soften. The faint glow of embers paints the cabin in reddish shadows, and those shadows blur into images behind your eyelids. People who lived in winter cabins often described their dreams as unusually vivid or strangely muted depending on temperature and fatigue. One settler's diary mentions winter dreams thick as wool, while another describes dreams clear as ice. You begin to understand both descriptions, even though they contradict each other. Your mind drifts. In the dream you walk through a forest heavy with snow. The trees are taller than any real one, stretching impossibly upward. Snowflakes fall slowly, too slowly, almost floating. You try to brush them aside, but your hand passes through them as if touching smoke. Somewhere behind you a fire crackles, though you cannot see it. You hear it. You feel its warmth on your back. This blending of real and imagined sensations was recorded by a 19th century traveller who claimed that the sensory deprivation of winter nights made dreams feel more physical. You feel that effect now. The dreams shift. You see the outline of the cabin from above as if rising gently into the sky. The roof looks fragile, thin under the weight of snow. You try to reach it. The scene dissolves into swirling frost that becomes the blankets wrapped around you again. Your breath hovers in front of your face, both inside the dream and outside it. The boundary feels porous. You wake briefly disoriented. The fire has settled into a rhythmic crackle. Someone nearby shifts in their sleep, letting out a soft murmur. You blink slowly, unsure whether the sound came from a dream or from the room. This kind of half-conscious confusion was familiar to many who lived through long winters. One account from a remote cabin notes that people sometimes spoke aloud during such transitions, not fully aware of being awake. You feel that urge now, a desire to whisper simply to ground yourself in reality. But sleep pulls you back before you make a sound. This time the dream is darker, not frightening, just deeper. You find yourself sitting beside a frozen lake, the ice stretching endlessly. The sky above glows with a pale green shimmer, reminiscent of northern lights you may have seen only in pictures. Yet here in the dream, they feel close enough to touch. You reach upward, and your fingers brush a ribbon of glowing light. It crackles faintly like logs settling in a fire. The cold in the dream matches the cold in the cabin. Your toes twitch inside your socks as if reacting to frost underfoot. Some early winter writings described dreams that mirrored physical sensations. People dreamed of walking through snowdrifts when their feet grew cold in bed, or dreamed of smoke when the fire burned low. The connection between the body and the dreamscape seems undeniable tonight. The scene shifts again. Now you are inside the cabin, but it is larger ceilings, higher walls glowing with impossible warmth. Figures move gently in the background, familiar yet unidentifiable. Their faces blur, their gestures soft like drifting snow. You feel comfort in their presence. Their voices are indistinct murmurs blending with the soft sigh of the wind outside. Whether they represent memories or imagination you cannot tell. Experts who study sleep patterns in historical settings offer differing interpretations about these layered dreams. Some propose that the fragmented sleep of winter nights naturally encouraged vivid, looping dream sequences. Others suggest that environmental stressors, cold darkness, uneven warmth created a unique cognitive landscape. And some believe the emotional isolation of winter made the mind more porous to symbolic imagery. You do not know which explanation fits best. All of them feel possible. You wake again, but only partly. The fire glows in a thin line of red across your vision. You shift slightly in your bedding. The fur blankets rustle softly. Your breath forms a faint mist that mixes with the half-formed dream still clinging to your thoughts. You close your eyes once more. This time your dream is simple. You sit by the hearth stirring a pot of something warm. The feeling is almost ordinary. You smell steam rising. You hear the bubbling of liquid. You feel heat on your face. It is so clear that you could swear someone had placed a kettle on the real fire. These domestic dream scenes are noted in letters from remote settlements, especially during long stretches of snowbound isolation. People dreamed of tasks, comforts, chores that brought familiarity. Then the dream thins again. The edges unravel. Darkness folds gently around you. All sounds fade. Even the wind seems to stop. You drift in this quiet for a long moment, suspended between breath and sleep. You sense the warmth of your body radiating outward, merging with the shared heat of the cabin. You sense the cold at your feet. You sense the fire's faint heartbeat behind you. When the dream finally dissolves completely, you find yourself somewhere between waking and sleeping, resting in a calm that belongs only to winter nights spent at close quarters, with fire cold and your own drifting thoughts. Here in this fragile stillness you surrender again to sleep, letting dreams shape themselves freely in the long hours before dawn. As the fire settles into a steady glow again, your thoughts drift toward the evening meal that came before sleep. Food feels different in winter, more purposeful, more weighted with meaning. Even when eaten hours earlier, it lingers in your body, warming you from the inside, grounding you against the cold. The memory of it becomes part of the night, shaping how you rest. You recall the pot simmering on the hearth, its aroma drifting through the cabin. The ingredients were simple by modern standards, but deeply satisfying after a long day in freezing air. Frontier households often relied on hearty stews thickened with whatever grains or root vegetables were available. This is clearly evidenced in community cook notes and handwritten meal logs that survive from isolated settlements. The goal was not variety or luxury. The goal was endurance, warmth, strength. Enough calories to fight the cold through the long hours of night. You think back to the texture of that stew heavy with fat rendered from preserved meat. Fat was prized in winter. It sustained the body far better than lean cuts. You can still feel it settling in your stomach, creating a slow-spreading heat that radiates outward. The sensation is one reason evening meals were often the largest of the day. Energy consumed at night stayed with you longer, especially when paired with the rhythm of broken sleep. There is a small household behaviour mentioned in passing by travellers who documented time spent in remote winter cabins. They noticed that families sometimes left a pot hanging over low embers through the night, allowing food to continue thickening slowly until morning. You imagine that pot now edges crusted scent deepening as it warms lazily beside the fire. It is comforting to know that something waits for you in the coming hours even before dawn breaks. Your stomach softens with the memory of that meal. Eating in winter feels like a partnership with the fire itself. You heated the food. The food now heats you. For a moment you lie still, reflecting on how intertwined these elements are: fire, sustenance, sleep, breath. As your mind wanders, you consider how people of the past understood the connection between food and warmth. Different historians interpret the surviving scraps of evidence in more than one way. Some believe families ate heavily at night because the body's natural rest period allowed better energy storage. Others argue it had more to do with daytime labour demand, saving the densest meal for when chores were done. A few point out that the darkness simply required some comforting ritual, and food provided that. Whatever the explanation, you feel the truth of it now. The warmth from that evening meal still anchors you. You sense it each time your breath curls into the cold air, slower and more content than it would be on an empty stomach. Your thoughts drift toward the small rituals that accompanied winter meals. You picture yourself earlier sitting near the hearth, blowing gently on a wooden spoon, watching steam rise. The glow of the fire made the broth look almost golden, the scent of herbs, faint but welcome, mixed with smoke in the air. Even the clatter of the ladle against the pot felt soothing, a reminder that nourishment was possible even in the grip of winter. You remember how your hands tingled as they warmed around the bowl. They had been stiff from cold fingers, uncooperative after hours outside. Holding warm food softened them, made them feel like your own again. This simple physical relief was something families counted on. Journals from cold regions describe mealtimes as the moment when the body rejoined itself, when pain receded long enough to feel human again. You shift slightly in your bedding, the memory of warmth spreading through you like an echo. Hunger is not an immediate threat now. You fed yourself well. You can feel the weight of that meal calming your nerves, slowing your heartbeat, letting sleep return with less resistance. Another sensory detail rises to mind. The crackle of the hearth mingled with the bubbling of the pot earlier, creating a soundscape so tied to winter that many who grew up in cabins described it later in life as the music of survival. Those who left such cabins behind often wrote about missing that sound in modern homes where heat came silently from radiators or vents. You understand why. There is comfort in food that announces itself through smell, sound, and warmth. You think about the preparation too, how chopping root vegetables made your cold fingers ache at first, then numb, then ache again. How stirring the pot felt like stirring thick mud. How seasoning became less about flavour and more about making the same ingredients more interesting night after night. You picture settlers doing the same repeating motions until they were woven into their bodies like muscle memory. You exhale slowly. The air from your lungs mixes with the faint scent of food still lingering in the cabin. Stronger smells stick to the logs, and this one has done so lightly, a reminder of nourishment in the air. Somewhere near the wall, someone else shifts, perhaps, dreaming about their own earlier meal. The small movement stirs the air. You catch a trace of smoke and leftover stew mingled together, a mixture that feels oddly comforting. You close your eyes again, letting warmth from your earlier meal support you as sleep drifts back in. Your stomach feels settled, your limbs heavier, your breath deeper. This is what evening food was meant to do, carry you through the darkest hours when the fire dimmed and the cold pressed hardest. As your mind softens once more, you imagine the pot still waiting by the embers, thick with tomorrow's breakfast, a quiet promise of warmth in the long winter ahead. The night grows quieter, and with the quiet comes something else, the slow return of old stories, the kind whispered at the edge of firelight when the darkness begins to feel too large. Winter has always invited tales. The cold presses close, the wind sounds unfamiliar, shadows shift in ways you can't quite explain. In such moments, people sought comfort in stories shaped by fear, hope, and imagination. Tonight you feel that same pull. You lie still beneath your blankets, listening to the low breathing of those around you. The fire glows softly, casting thin ribbons of light along the cabin walls. The world outside is silent except for an occasional surge of wind brushing against the logs. In this stillness, memories of tales you once heard drift forward, settling gently into your thoughts like falling snow. The people who lived in cabins like this long before you often wove their beliefs into the darkness. Some of their ideas are clearly evidenced in handwritten notes tucked into family Bibles or recorded in winter journals. These notes reveal a blend of folklore and faith-practical caution, wrapped inside poetic imagery. You begin to imagine how those early households once spoke to one another during nights just like this. The wind hums along the roofline. Its voice is low, steady, almost melodic. There is a quiet superstition tucked within certain northern storytelling traditions that the wind could carry memories, whispers of ancestors who walk the winter paths before you. Whether symbolic or literal, the idea persists in old tales shared by families who spent generations in frozen landscapes. You let your eyes drift to the rafters overhead. The cabin feels closer, more intimate, as if it leans inward to listen along with you. The glow of the fire flickers and stretches upward, bending around the beams in long, thin shadows. Those shadows dance in strange, deliberate patterns. You blink slowly, letting your imagination fill in the blanks. There is a distinctive little custom tucked into old oral accounts. Families often told stories that explain the strange noises of the night. A tapping on the wall might be the snow knocker, a wandering winter spirit checking that homes remained strong. A shifting sound in the rafters could be the ice walker, a creature said to travel between frozen branches high above the ground. Most likely these sounds came from animals or shifting wood, but the stories made them less frightening, especially for children. You picture a small child lying close to their parents, listening wide-eyed as these tales transformed fear into wonder. You breathe slowly, letting these imagined stories wrap around you like an extra blanket. The darkness outside no longer feels empty. It feels watchful, ancient, filled with echoes of the people who once lived through winters, harsher than your own. A faint creak sounds from the far corner of the room. It could be a settling log or a shifting board. But in the half-dreaming mind of someone who's been awake too long, it feels charged with possibility. People long ago faced the same uncertainty. And so, they created tales not to frighten, but to make sense of the unknown. In early cabin accounts, one writer described winter nights as a thin place, a time when the boundary between the living world and the story world felt softer. Whether this was belief or poetic reflection remains uncertain, but the idea resonates tonight. Your thoughts drift toward faith now. For many families, religious belief intertwined naturally with folklore. Evening prayers were spoken beside stories of forest spirits. Bible verses sat comfortably next to superstitions passed down from older relatives. The cold forged these traditions together, each providing a different kind of strength. Little handwritten notes in family documents show that people often prayed for protection, not just from hunger or wolves, but from night visitors or midwinter mischief terms that blend theology and folktale in a distinctly human way. You can almost imagine a voice speaking into the cabin, low and steady, stay close to the fire. Winter listens. Whether or not such words were ever truly spoken hardly matters. They feel real enough under the shifting glow of the embers. Your breathing deepens and the stories take on a more dreamlike tone. You picture the great forests outside their branches heavy with snow, their trunks standing tall like guardians of the night. Some early travellers described forests in winter as cathedrals of ice, their stillness bordering on sacred. Today's researchers interpret these descriptions in more than one way. Some see them as attempts to make sense of overwhelming solitude, while others view them as early environmental spirituality. You lie there sensing both possibilities at once. A memory surfaces from something someone once told you, that people in the north used to believe the trees themselves spoke in winter, not with words but with creaks and groans that carried meaning. Perhaps the meaning was only ever imagined, but when the night is long and sleep is restless, the imagination becomes a companion rather than a threat. You listen now for such a message. A long low groan echoes through the rafters, the wood shrinking further in the cold. For a moment it does feel like communication. The fire fades again, dimming enough that the cabin walls become indistinct. Shapes blur, shadows merge. It feels as if the edges of the cabin soften, becoming less rigid. This blurring effect is something noted in personal accounts by people who lived through long winter nights. They wrote of seeing shapes in the dark, not necessarily frightening ones, but familiar outlines that could have been imagined companions. Some described them as memories of loved ones, others as protectors shaped by the mind's own need for comfort. You feel something similar now. The shadows seem less like emptiness and more like gentle presences. They curl along the logs like silent listeners, patient and unintrusive. You shift slightly under your blankets, feeling warmth gather round you again. The stories drifting through your mind no longer carry fear. Instead, they feel grounding, part of the fabric of the night. They connect you to generations who survived winters by telling tales that softened the sharpness of the cold and made the darkness feel shared rather than isolating. You exhale slowly. Your breath rises as a thin cloud in the faint firelight. You watch it drift, then dissolve. Somewhere in the space between waking and dreaming, you sense a quiet harmony forming between the cabin, the cold, the fire, and your own thoughts. The stories settle inside you like soft layers of snow, calming your mind without even trying. You close your eyes. The tales fade into the background, but the comfort remains. The long winter night continues gentler, now softened by the company of old beliefs and the quiet strength they carry. You let yourself rest in that soft space, warm, safe, and carried gently towards sleep once more. Moonlight finds its way into the cabin long after you've drifted in and out of sleep. It arrives quietly like a slow breath of silver, slipping between the smallest cracks in the walls. At first you barely notice it. The glow is faint, almost imaginary, mixing with the ember light in a way that makes the whole room shimmer with soft, wavering brightness. But as your eyes adjust, you begin to sense the moon's presence, the way you might sense a gentle visitor entering a room without speaking. You lift your head slightly from your bedding. The cabin, once swallowed in darkness, now has contours again. Frost along the logs glitters in pale streaks, catching the moonlight in delicate patterns. The effect is so subtle, you almost wonder if you're dreaming. Yet this moment is familiar to anyone who has lived through long winters in a simple shelter. Many frontier journals mention nights when the moon turned the inside of a cabin into something almost luminous, as if the world outside were reaching in to remind sleepers of its beauty. The window, small as it is, glows softly. Light filters through the frost clinging to its surface, making it look like a sheet of cracked ice illuminated from behind. You watch as the moonbeam drifts slowly across the floor, inching toward your bedding. It moves with the patience of the night, giving shape and texture to things the firelight only hinted at. When it finally reaches you, the glow brushes your face with a chill brightness that feels both distant and intimate. You blink slowly. For a moment, the beam makes your breath visible in a new way. The mist briefly glows before fading again. You inhale deeply and the cold air fills your chest with a crisp clarity that reminds you just how thin the line is between comfort and cold. There is a small observation written by a travelling carpenter who spent a winter in a remote cabin. He noted that the moonlight sometimes felt warmer than the air, though it held no heat. He meant the emotional warmth, the way the glow eased a person's fear of the dark. You sense that now. Though the moon adds no physical warmth, it lifts the heaviness of the night, making the cabin feel less closed in. The fire is low again, and you can see the embers more clearly now that moonlight helps illuminate the room. The faint red core pulses beneath a thin layer of ash. You know you'll need to tend it again soon, but for the moment you simply watch. The blend of red and silver feels almost magical, as if two separate worlds have overlapped briefly inside the cabin. Your gaze shifts toward the frosted window. The outside world remains frozen, but the moonlight creates a gentle illusion of movement as it glides across ripples in the frost. Shapes form and dissolve, hinting at branches swaying outside or snow falling softly. It becomes a kind of silent theatre performed only for those awake enough to notice. A curious detail contained in old northern folk accounts suggests that some families believed the moonlight had protective qualities during winter. Not in a mystical sense, but in a comforting one. Moonlit nights meant clearer skies, less risk of storms, and easier travel if someone needed to step outside. Whether this belief came from experience or wishful thinking is left open by the few written references that survive. Still, as you lie here, you appreciate the quiet reassurance that a clear sky brings. The moon climbs higher and its glow shifts accordingly. A long, narrow beam stretches across the wooden table near the hearth. The grain of the wood stands out sharply, each ridge illuminated. You see every detail, tiny scratches from past meals, a knot that forms the shape of an eye, the faint scorch mark from a pan set down too quickly. These details look sharper than usual, etched by silver light. You realize how rare it feels to see the room without fire dominating every shadow. The moon reveals what the fire hides. Fire makes the cabin feel warm and small. Moonlight makes it feel spacious, fragile, almost suspended in time. You shift slightly, causing the blankets and furs to rustle softly. The moonlight glides over them too, catching on the tips of fur, turning them into tiny silver needles that shimmer when you breathe. The effect is mesmerizing enough to hold your attention, even as drowsiness tugs at the edges of your mind. Your thoughts drift to how ancient the moon is, how many winter nights it has witnessed. People across centuries have watched it through cabin windows, igloo openings, tent flaps, and cave mouths. No matter the shelter, moonlight threads its way into human stories. Early winter correspondence from remote families hints at how cherished the sight of a full moon could be in the long isolation of winter. It made people feel less alone, less buried in the dark. The moonlight continues creeping closer to your face. You feel its glow on your eyelids as you close them again, casting a faint pinkish hue over the darkness inside your mind. You inhale. The air feels colder now, but the light gives you something to focus on besides the bite of the chill. Outside, the wind calms briefly as if pausing to listen. The forest hushes. Snow settles in soft, quiet layers. It feels as though the whole world has frozen in a moment of contemplation. You open your eyes again to watch the moonlight slide slowly toward the hearth. It touches the stones. It touches the old iron tools resting beside them. It glints on the edge of the pot still hanging there from earlier, turning the rim into a thin circle of silver. As it does, you feel a quiet connection to the many generations before you, who also lay awake on nights just like this, watching the moonlight glide across their shelters. Different lives, different cabins, different winters, but the same gentle illumination. The moon climbs higher still and the beam becomes wider, brighter, softer. It washes over your bedding like a cool hand, steady and unhurried. The brightness eases one final layer of tension in your chest, calming you almost as much as the warmth of the fire did earlier. Your breathing slows, your body settles. Sleep gathers again at the edges of your awareness. The cabin rests in a blend of glowing embers and quiet moonlight, and slowly, very slowly, you let yourself drift back into the soft dark. You sink deeper into your bedding as the hours slip by, and in this extended darkness your thoughts turn inward. Winter has a way of folding the mind into itself, especially when days are short and nights seem to last longer than memory can measure. You feel the weight of isolation settling slowly across your chest, not in a crushing way, but in a quiet, steady pressure that makes everything inside the cabin feel both intimate and impossibly far away. It is during nights like this that people of the past became acutely aware of their own thoughts. Many personal writings from remote homesteads describe a kind of winter introspection, clearly supported by the repetitive patterns found in diaries that span the colder months. Without much stimulation from the outside world, the mind filled the silence with its own reflections. You now experience the same drifting contemplation shaped by darkness, fatigue, and the slow pulse of the fire. You lie still, wrapped tightly, listening to the sounds inside your own head. The mind grows more sensitive in these circumstances. Small worries expand. Passing thoughts linger. Even memories take on new shapes, appearing brighter or more haunting depending on the cold and the hour. For a moment you feel as though time has loosened its grip entirely, letting thoughts swirl in loops rather than lines. Somewhere in that half-sleep state you sense how deeply solitude can seep into a person. Not loneliness exactly, just the unbroken awareness of being enclosed in a tiny space surrounded by vast frozen quiet. Different researchers reviewing frontier writings have noted that extended winters sometimes cause people to slip into contemplative moods that were neither distressing nor restful, a middle ground that defies easy labels. You settle into that state now. Your body shifts slightly and the movement stirs a soft cascade of thoughts. You think about your life outside this imaginary cabin. You think about people you've known, places you've been, choices you've made. Winter encourages this introspection, perhaps, because the world outside is stripped of distraction. It offers no colour except white, no movement except falling snow, no sound except wind. You exhale slowly, watching your breath drift upward. The mist curls in the dimness, then dissolves. The sight triggers another thread of reflection. Breath becomes the only clear sign of life in the cold, a reminder that you remain warm enough to continue. In some old accounts, settlers described watching their breath as a way to centre themselves during long restless nights. The repetition brought calm, like watching waves or listening to soft rain. You follow that pattern now, one breath, then another. The rhythm feels steady enough to anchor your drifting thoughts. Your mind wanders towards something else. How quickly isolation changes the perception of sound. A slight creak in the wall now feels amplified. The drip of melting frost from a beam becomes strangely meaningful. Even the rustle of your own blanket seems louder. It's as if the cabin itself has become part of your internal monologue. You recall a nearly forgotten winter saying that turned up in a regional folklore collection. The cabin speaks when people grow quiet. Perhaps it was meant metaphorically, or perhaps it described the way wood shrinks and expands in response to temperature changes. But in the stillness of the night you understand how such a phrase might come alive. The structure around you feels attentive, listening to your thoughts as much as you listen to its sounds. Another faint sound reaches you now, something like a whisper, though you know it is only wind sliding past gaps between the logs. Yet the illusion is strong. People before you heard the same faint murmurs and assigned meaning to them, whether spiritual, emotional, or simply imaginative. The historical clues point in several possible directions regarding how these nighttime impressions were interpreted. Some families leaned on religious explanations, others turned to folklore, others still simply accepted the strange quiet of winter as part of life. You shift again, trying to find a more comfortable position. Your hips ache slightly from the hard bedding. Isolation sharpens physical sensations too. Contrary to romantic depictions, frontier diaries frequently mention the ache of backs pressed too long against rough beds, or the stiffness that came from lying still in cold air. These discomforts encourage people to wake and wander the cabin at times, if only to stretch or adjust their blankets. You consider doing the same, but the warmth you've built feels too precious to abandon even for a moment. You close your eyes and breathe again. This time your thoughts drift to the emotional side of isolation. You imagine how cabin families once navigated these long nights together, sharing stories, labour fears, hopes. Some households surely found comfort in togetherness. Others likely felt tension rise in close quarters. One surviving letter written by a farmer's daughter mentions the winter feeling of being both too close and too far from others in the same room. You can appreciate that paradox now. Even surrounded by imaginary companions, you feel both comforted and profoundly solitary. Your mind quiets for a moment. Then another thought emerges, a memory of something simple, someone's voice, a warm moment from another season. Isolation often brings cherished memories forward, brightening them against the dark like sparks flaring from the fire. You let the memory glow in your mind for a few breaths before it fades slowly. Your awareness drifts again toward the cold beyond the cabin. The vastness of night, the snow covering everything, the trees standing silent, all of it presses gently around your thoughts. In this deep isolation, you feel both small and strangely connected to something immense. Early explorers sometimes describe this sensation as winter's embrace, a term that sounds poetic but captures a genuine experience, a feeling that the world has wrapped itself around you, holding you still. You shift one last time, settling into your blankets as the fire crackles faintly behind you. Isolation no longer feels heavy. It feels spacious, almost peaceful. The silence that seemed oppressive earlier now feels soft like wool. Your thoughts no longer tumble, they glide. Gradually your breathing slows. The cabin settles around you. The cold air feels a little less sharp. Your awareness grows dim, not from fatigue alone, but from a strange sense of quiet acceptance. And in that slow, gentle darkness, the isolation of winter becomes not an enemy, but a waiting place, calm, deep, and ready to cradle you into sleep once more. At some point in the long night, you become aware of soft movements that are not entirely human. A faint rustle, a shifting weight, a quiet snort of warm breath rising into the cold cabin air. You open your eyes just enough to see the vague outlines of animals resting nearby, sharing the same fragile warmth that you do. In many frontier regions, it was well supported by day-to-day accounts that livestock often slept inside or in adjoining lean-tos during the deepest winter months. Not for convenience, but out of sheer necessity. Animals needed the warmth just as much as people did, and their body heat contributed to the temperature inside small wooden shelters. You can hear them now. A slow rhythmic chewing from one corner where a tethered goat works on a leftover bit of fodder. The soft stamping of a cow shifting its weight to find a more comfortable stance. Even the delicate scratch of a chicken adjusting itself in a nesting basket. Their presence fills the cabin with a sense of life that counters the emptiness outside. You inhale and the air carries their scent, warm, animal musk, mingled with hay smoke and damp wool. It's an earthy smell familiar to those who lived in such conditions. Some modern readers might imagine it as unpleasant, but people of the time often spoke of it with fondness. One family record describes nighttime animals as the hearth's companions, an affectionate phrase that hints at how important their presence felt. Your eyes focus slowly. A faint shape moves near the far wall where the small cow has been bedded down on straw. She exhales sharply, sending up a thin cloud of steam. The sight so closely mirrors your own breath earlier that you feel a sudden kinship. You're both creatures surviving the same cold, relying on the same fire and the same walls. There was a subtle habit captured in the recollection of a travelling farmhand who noted that families sometimes spoke softly to their animals before sleeping the same way they might murmur to children. These whispers were practical animals calmed by the sound of familiar voices, but they also had a soothing effect on the humans themselves. You can imagine the settling comfort of such quiet words, in a room where everyone depended on one another to outlast the cold. One of the chickens lets out a soft cluck, restless even in sleep. The sound breaks the stillness gently like a pebble dropped into deep snow. You listen for a moment and then the silence returns. The logs creak, the fire pops, and the animals settle again, their bodies relaxing into the simple rhythm of existing through winter's long night. Beyond the cabin walls, other animals roam the snow-covered world. You hear them sometimes. A fox trotting lightly past its paws, making faint impressions that crunch softly under frost. Maybe a hare bounding through drifts in search of bark or twigs. Wild creatures often approach cabins during the night, drawn by the faint warmth or the scent of stored food. Several winter journals written by travelling merchants recount evenings when the soft pad of paws could be heard circling a shelter, curious but cautious. You listen for those sounds now. At first nothing. Then a faint brushing noise, as if something small has nudged against the outer logs. You freeze breath shallow. The animals inside tense slightly, their instincts sharp, even in half sleep. But after a moment the brushing sound fades. Probably a rabbit or weasel passing by. The tension dissolves from your shoulders. Inside the cabin, the shared warmth from animals is noticeable. Their steady breathing adds a layer of heat to the air that you hadn't appreciated earlier. In fact, a few old building notes from rural communities point out that the combined warmth of animals inside a shelter could noticeably raise the temperature overnight. You feel that warmth now subtle but present. It moves through the air like an unspoken contribution to the night's survival. You remember reading that different specialists examining winter lifestyles point to contrasting interpretations of this human-animal closeness. Some argue it created a strong bond between families and their livestock, seeing them as part of the household. Others suggest the relationship was mostly practical, shaped by necessity more than affection. But when you lie here half awake, listening to the gentle sounds of living creatures breathing in the dark, the distinction feels unnecessary. Warmth is warmth. Companionship is companionship. Survival blurs the lines. A goat shifts again, hooves scraping softly on the wooden floor. You turn your head slightly and catch the faint outline of its ears flicking in response to a distant noise. You sense how alert it remains, even while resting, how it too protects the cabin by noticing things you might miss. This awareness feels comforting, like having extra senses keeping watch through the night. The fire glows faintly. The animals' shadows stretch across the floor, long and wavering in the dim light. Their silhouettes merge with the outlines of furniture and tools, giving the room a dreamlike stillness. You breathe quietly, your body settling deeper under your blankets as the shared warmth settles around you. The cow exhales again, slower this time, a deep rumbling breath full of fatigue. You listen to it with a kind of tenderness. There is something grounding about sharing the night with creatures that ask for nothing but warmth and safety. Their presence reminds you that winter nights were never just a human hardship, they were a challenge for every living thing in the frozen wilderness. You close your eyes, the steady breathing of animals and people blends into a soft harmony. The harshness of winter feels slightly less immense, slightly less sharp. You sense the quiet bond of living beings choosing or needing to endure the night together, and slowly that shared stillness draws you back towards sleep. A low creak troubles the edge of your dreaming, the kind of sound that sends a faint ripple through the quiet without fully waking you at first. You lie still, eyes half closed, trying to decide whether the noise came from inside your mind or from the structure above you. Then it comes again deeper this time, almost like a long sigh pressed through wood. You blink into the darkness and realize the roof is speaking under the weight of accumulating snow. Winter cabins were built with this burden in mind. Many construction notes preserved in community records describe angled roofs made steep enough to shed snow, yet strong enough to hold it when storms piled more than expected. But even the best design could not prevent the slow, heavy pressure from making itself heard. Tonight you feel that pressure settling downward like a patient, uninvited guest. You lift your head slightly, adjusting your blankets. The air feels colder near your face, and you sense that the fire has dimmed again. Without the warmth to create rising currents, the cold settles from above, seeping through the ceiling boards, making their groans sharper and more pronounced. Another creak reverberates through the rafters, followed by a soft puff of frost sifting down, barely visible in the faint glow of the embers. You listen more closely. Snow shifts again, a long, stretching rustle, as if the roof were shrugging under a heavy coat. Families living in such cabins often became intimately familiar with these sounds, recognizing which creaks meant normal settling and which signaled dangerous wait. The knowledge, often passed down from parent to child in matter-of-fact phrases, formed a quiet but critical part of winter survival. A subtle habit appears in one travelling surveyor's recollection. He wrote that settlers sometimes tapped the rafters lightly with a stick before bedding down on stormy nights, listening for a change in tone that might indicate structural stress. You picture yourself doing that now, lifting a hand to the ceiling and giving it the gentlest tap, not in fear, but in curiosity. The sound that returns is solid enough, low and familiar. Still the roof groans again. This time it sounds like a log twisting slightly under the shifting weight. You hold your breath listening. Nothing follows. No crack. No rush of snow. Just stillness. Experts studying early cabin construction often offer contrasting interpretations about how much weight these roofs could safely bear. Some argue that the flexible design allowed the logs to shift without breaking, while others suggest that many roofs were dangerously overloaded each winter. The surviving evidence leaves room for both possibilities, and listening to the wood tonight you understand the uncertainty well. You shift your position slightly, careful not to disturb the fragile pocket of warmth around your body. When you turn your blankets, pull tighter around your shoulders, and the sensation brings a small wave of comfort. The sound of the roof becomes less threatening when you feel insulated against the cold. Outside, you imagine the snow continuing its slow descent from a sky heavy with clouds. Flakes settle in layers, soft, then dense, then soft again. Some drift gently, others fall with more insistence. The forest absorbs the weight quietly, but the cabin must carry it. The roof bears it, and in the deep quiet that follows you hear the soft hiss of loose snow sliding ever so slightly down the shingles, only to catch again in a deeper drift. Occasionally a louder thud echoes overhead. A chunk of snow has slipped from a higher branch and landed squarely on the roof. The sudden weight makes the structure shudder for a moment. Then it settles again. The animals in the corner shift uneasily, rustling their bedding. You hear the cow exhale sharply, then grow still. You stir the embers with your mind alone, unwilling to leave the warmth of your bedding just yet. You know you will get up soon, but for now you simply breathe slowly and let the sounds around you arrange themselves. Wood expands and contracts with temperature changes, and in the stable cold of night it contracts sharply. That contraction produces small cracking noises, not from breakage, but from adjustment. You listen to them like someone listening to the ticking of an old clock, counting the seconds by instinct, not intention. One particular sound catches your attention, a deep hollow knock that seems to come from the joint where two beams meet above you. It is not alarming, just unusual. Cabin builders of the past understood these sounds, intimately noting them in practical field guides as night-settling knocks, a term that captures their everyday nature. Still in the dark, with sleep clinging to you, the sound feels heavier. You imagine stepping outside into the night. You picture snow piled deep along the roof slope, glinting faintly in the moonlight. You see the curve of the drifts shaped by wind. The roof bows slightly under the weight, but holds. It is not fragile. It is simply doing its work. Another soft whisper of snow lands above you. The cabin responds with a sigh. You respond with a breath of your own. The moment passes. Eventually, warmth from the fire's last remaining embers reaches your skin again in a faint wave. You realize it's time to tend the hearth, and with some reluctance you sit up. Your movements stir a swirl of cold air that brushes your face and chest. You shiver once, then move quietly across the room, guided by the faint glow. As you coax the embers back to life, the roof creaks once more as if acknowledging the renewed warmth. The flame lifts. The shadows shift. Heat rises again toward the beams, easing their tension just enough to still the noises for a moment. You return to your bedding, the rustle of blankets loud in the hush around you. The roof settles again, resting its weight with slow patience. The fire crackles softly. The animals breathe deeply. And the cabin becomes quiet once more. You lie down and close your eyes. In this deep winter night, even the roof feels alive. Even the weight of snow becomes part of the story you're living. And as the sounds fold gently into the stillness around you, you drift once more towards sleep. You wake again in the night, but this time it is not the fire or the cold that draws your attention. It is something more personal, more intimate, the simple awareness of your own body and how unclean it feels after days of winter living. In a cabin like this, hygiene becomes a shifting concept shaped far more by practicality than preference. You stretch slightly beneath your blankets and feel the stiffness of fabric that has gathered smoke sweat. and the faint grit of ash carried by every stirring breeze inside the room. Bathing is the first thought that comes to mind, but the idea dissolves as quickly as it forms. There is no warm bathroom, no shower, no running water. The world outside is a frozen expanse, and the water you do have is icy enough to numb your hands after only a few seconds. It is echoed in multiple winter supply records that washing with cold water was avoided unless absolutely necessary. The risk of chilling the body too deeply was simply too great. People learned quickly to embrace a different rhythm of cleanliness. You breathe in. Your clothing, your bedding, even your hair hold the scent of smoke. It clings to everything with the same determination as frost on the cabin walls. At first, the smell is sharp, almost metallic. Over time, it becomes something else entirely, a softened odour that blends into the background of existence. Many families of the past hardly noticed it after a week or two. You too feel yourself growing accustomed to it. You shift again, feeling the layers of wool and fur brushing against your skin. The heaviness of the blankets makes the air feel dense, and the combination of sweat and constant warmth trapped inside the cocoon leaves you with a faint dampness along your neck and under your arms. Cleanliness in these conditions means staying dry enough to avoid dangerous cold and tending your body in small ways. A cloth warmed by the fire, a handful of snow melted in a tin cup. These were the tools of winter washing. There is a curious little behaviour passed down as practical wisdom in some remote communities. People would rub snow briskly on their faces in the morning to feel refreshed. You imagine doing that now, picturing the sharp sting followed by a surprising sense of clarity. Others used bits of cloth dipped in warm broth to wipe hands and face choosing warmth over fragrance or thoroughness. Even these small acts felt indulgent during the coldest months. You lift your hand to your face and brush fingertips along your cheek. Your skin feels rougher than usual, touched by the persistent dryness of winter. The air inside the cabin leaches moisture from everything, including you. It is no surprise that settlers often wrote about cracked hands and chapped lips during long winters. More than one family ledger mentions recipes for salves made from tallow or beeswax applied at night to soothe skin worn thin by cold and work. You tuck your hand back under the blankets, trying to preserve the small warmth you've accumulated. A faint itch brushes your shoulder. Not alarming, just a reminder that clothing worn this long begins to irritate even the most patient skin. You find yourself shifting again, adjusting layers, trying to ease the discomfort without exposing too much of your body to the cold. You recall that in many households, changing into clean clothing was a rare privilege in winter. Laundry required water heated at the hearth, which consumed precious fuel and time. It also required drying, and drying wool or linen in cold weather could take days. Because of this, families often rotated only a few garments throughout the season. The practice is confirmed by entries in farmhouse journals that talk about winter sets of clothing meant to last uninterrupted until thaw. The thought makes you smile tiredly. You pull your blanket tighter, feeling its familiar weight. Cleanliness in this environment becomes relative. You're clean enough if your hands are dry, if your socks aren't wet, if your face isn't coated with soot from the fire. These criteria, simple as they sound, mean survival. A faint trickle of doubt enters your mind as you think about how people long ago felt about their own limited hygiene. Those who study the era draw contrasting conclusions. Some interpret the sparse references to washing as evidence that people simply accepted a different baseline of bodily comfort. Others argue that these omissions reflect the normalization of hardship rather than indifference. The absence of detailed notes leaves the matter open to interpretation. Your own experience tonight suggests something subtle in between. You do not feel disgust. You do not feel carefree. You simply acknowledge the reality of your environment. Warmth is more important than soap, and endurance outweighs vanity. A soft sound reaches your ears as someone else in the cabin shifts. You hear the quiet rustle of wool, the faint grunt of someone turning over. These movements remind you that every person here is experiencing the same ebbing attention to hygiene. The understanding is unspoken but mutual. No one expects perfection. Everyone simply does what they can. You imagine the cramped routines of mornings in such a cabin. People would gather near the hearth, rubbing hands together, briskly splashing minimal water on faces, shaking out blankets to release the frost that had formed overnight. In one crumbly notebook found among old belongings, a short note describes morning dusting as an essential part of winter life. It meant shaking out bedding, brushing crumbs off clothing, and beating snow off coats, not to achieve cleanliness, but to maintain some sense of order amid constant discomfort. You reach up and run your fingers through your hair. It feels coarse, stiff in places from the cold, tangled from restless sleep. The idea of a warm wash creeps into your imagination again, but it fades when you remember the frigid world outside. Instead, you adjust your hat slightly so it sits more comfortably over your ears. The fire crackles softly. The warmth it radiates makes you consider washing your hands just a little perhaps by warming a cloth at the hearth. The thought is tempting, but fatigue weighs on you heavily, and the pocket of warmth you've built feels too precious to leave right now. Your body relaxes again, settling into the light haze between waking and sleep. The feeling of imperfect cleanliness lingers, but it no longer feels pressing. You accept it the way people have always accepted the inconveniences of winter, patiently knowing that the season demands resilience more than refinement. As your breathing slows, you sense a quiet harmony forming between your body and the environment. The discomfort becomes familiar. The scents become part of the cabin's identity. The roughness of fabric against skin becomes a reminder of survival. Winter does not offer luxury, it offers endurance. And as sleep begins to pull you gently downward again, you surrender to that reality, with calm acceptance, knowing that the morning will bring its own small rituals of winter, hygiene imperfect, practical, and entirely enough. The night stretches onward, and as your thoughts drift in the warm pocket of your bedding, you begin to imagine what it must have been like for children to sleep through winter nights in a log cabin. Their presence would have changed the entire rhythm of the room. You picture them curled tightly beneath patched quilts, little bodies clustered together like bundled sparrows, breaths rising in soft puffs that fade into the dim air. The cabin feels different with this imagined energy lighter, in some ways more fragile in others. Children did not sleep as deeply or as steadily as adults. Countless seasonal notes preserved in rural communities mention how young ones tended to wriggle, kick off blankets, or call out in their sleep. In winter, this was more than a small inconvenience. A single exposed foot or arm could chill quickly. Parents often checked on their children several times through the night, adjusting blankets, tucking fur edges around tiny shoulders, making sure the warmth held. You shift slightly in your bedding, imagining a child soft stirring beside you, perhaps a little hand reaching instinctively toward a parent in the dark, perhaps a sleepy murmur unintelligible but full of vulnerability. The thought adds a tenderness to the room. Even the fire seems to glow more warmly with the idea of young lives curled close to its heat. There is a faint scraping outside, likely just ice shifting on a branch, but you can imagine how such sounds would prompt children to stir. Young ears, sharper and less accustomed to winter's nightly noises, often woke at the slightest creak. One winter entry from a family ledger recounts a child whispering the trees are walking, after hearing the deep groans of frozen trunks outside. You can almost hear that shy voice now echoing through this cabin stillness. Parents reassured their children with words, gestures, or simply a comforting presence. Sometimes a parent would draw a particularly restless child closer, letting them sleep tucked against their chest, where body heat created the safest cocoon. Sleeping arrangements were fluid shifting based on cold health and temperament. Families remembered these configurations as part of the season's routine, a nightly puzzle built from warmth and affection. Yet winter nights could also be hard for children. The cold seeped through walls and into even the thickest bedding. Clothing was layered but imperfect. A child's feet might freeze more easily, their small noses turning red with chill. Various families kept old felted socks specifically for nighttime use, handed down through generations. The practice appears consistently in bundled household notes from scattered homesteads, showing how essential these tiny comforts were. Imagine one child whispering to another, sharing small stories or worries before falling asleep. Siblings often slept together for warmth, creating huddled little nests, arms tangled, blankets tangled, dreams tangled. The closeness helped them relax in ways that the dark and cold alone never could. More than one journal kept by travelling ministers or tutors mentions how children's chatter spilled into the late hours during long winter nights. A bedtime might start early, but sleep rarely followed immediately. Children often asked questions about the night, why the cabin creaked, why the wind howled, why the darkness felt thicker in winter than in summer. Their curiosity made everything feel a little more alive. In your mind's eye, you watch one child finally drift off, breath-deepening fingers gently curled. Another follows soon after, snuggling closer to their sibling. The room grows quieter, softer. Even the animals seem to settle with more calm when children sleep peacefully. Not every night was peaceful, though. Illness was a constant worry. Winter brought coughs, fevers, and the exhaustion that came from weeks spent indoors with limited fresh air. A child's cough could echo sharply through the room, waking adults immediately. Families kept broths simmering or herbs drying for such nights, hoping to ease symptoms with the limited tools available. Some warming salves were passed from neighbour to neighbour, their recipes scribbled in cursive on scraps of paper. You can almost smell one such mixture, pine resin, and melted tallow warming slightly near the fire. You adjust your position, imagining the gentle weight of a child leaning against you. Children sleeping in such cold rooms often burrowed instinctively into whatever warmth they found. Their bodies, smaller and more sensitive, cooled quickly. To lose even a little heat could be dangerous, especially during sudden cold snaps. Families watched for signs: cold fingers, pale lips, shallow breathing. An early cabin guide warns plainly that a child may cool faster than a fire may rise, an observation born from lived experience. When dawn approached, though dawn in winter meant only the faintest easing of darkness, children were often the first to stir. Their restlessness became part of the household's rhythm. Their questions began anew. Their laughter sometimes filled the space while adults still felt half stuck in sleep. Yet even in the middle of the night, children carried a spark that softened winter's grip. A tiny sigh, a sleepy stretch, a hand reaching for warmth. These small gestures reminded adults of purpose, of persistence. Some families looked back on winter nights as times of unexpected closeness when hardship forced tenderness to surface. At the same time, those who studied family dynamics in frontier winters have noted that interpretations of such memories vary widely. Some diaries paint winter nights with children as burdensome, filled with worry, disrupted sleep, and constant tending. Others describe them as precious bonding moments that shaped childhood and parenthood alike. The surviving accounts reflect both realities, leaving a wide spectrum of emotional truth rather than a single narrative. You breathe slowly, letting these imagined moments settle into the atmosphere of the cabin. Even though the children are only in your mind, the room feels warmer with the echo of their presence. You picture a small wooden toy, perhaps carved by a parent, resting near the hearth, its edges worn smooth by many tiny hands. You picture a blanket patched several times by a careful mother, edges frayed but clean. These details bring life into the empty corners of the room. Another soft shift stirs near the imagined sleeping place of a child. You allow yourself to believe just for a moment that a small foot has kicked against a fur covering, that a dream has made someone twitch, that the rhythm of children sleeping is part of the night around you. You close your eyes again. The warmth of the blankets, the glow of the embers, and the memory of children's presence mingle into a gentle calm. Winter nights are long, demanding, and sometimes bleak, but they are also full of these delicate moments of shared life, whether real or remembered. As you drift towards sleep, the thought lingers in a cabin like this. Every breath, every movement, every child's dream becomes part of the fight against the cold. And somehow, woven together, they make the darkness feel just a little less endless. Sleep loosens its hold on you again, not gently this time, but with a slow ache pulling through your limbs. You feel heavy as if the cold has settled inside your bones. In a winter cabin, illness is never far from thought. Even something as simple as a lingering chill or a scratchy throat takes on new weight. The air is dry, your breath shallow, and your body feels both warm and strangely fragile beneath the blankets. People who lived through long winters often viewed sleep as a kind of medicine, something that helped restore the body when food and warmth could only go so far. This idea appears quietly across scattered domestic notes, where parents wrote about keeping sick family members close to the hearth so they could sleep themselves stronger. As you shift under your coverings, you understand exactly why rest mattered so deeply. Your stomach feels tight, your muscles tired. Whether it's the cold, the dryness, or simply the strain of days spent in a harsh environment, your body reminds you that winter demands respect. You take a slow breath. The air presses against your chest colder than you'd like. A faint cough slips out and the sound seems too loud in the quiet cabin. For a moment you worry. Illness in this environment is not something you take lightly. Someone in the imaginary corner of the cabin exhales with a heavier sound, and you picture another sleeper curling tighter under blankets, fighting off their own fatigue. Travel accounts from isolated settlements describe how sickness often moved through families during winter, passing from one bedroll to the next, with everyone sleeping close together and little fresh air to circulate symptoms spread easily. Those early observers often noted how a single cough in the night could ripple through a cabin with surprising speed. You shift again, trying to find a position that eases the pressure in your chest. Sleep tries to take you, but your body stalls. You feel caught between exhaustion and something that keeps you slightly alert, as if your instincts won't fully release you. The fire's warmth helps, but only to a point. Your legs feel cold. Your throat feels scratchy. You know that if this sensation worsens, dawn will feel even further away. You remember that families kept small remedies tucked in corners or hung from rafters, herbs dried in bunches, tallow mixed with pine resin, simple broth simmered long enough to coax strength back into tired bodies. A rare snapshot shared in a wandering healer's winter journal describes how thyme or spruce tips steeped in hot water were given for coughs, the steam offering brief comfort in the cold. You imagine such a cup now warm in your hands, the vapour rising into your dry throat. You breathe again, slower this time, letting the faint warmth of the fire reach you gradually. The tension in your ribs eases just a little. You may not be sick, you tell yourself, just worn down. The boundary between exhaustion and illness blurs easily on winter nights like this. Cabin dwellers often wrote that tiredness alone could make them feel feverish, only to recover once the fire was stirred and blankets readjusted. Still the worry lingers. Those who study winter hardships note a wide range of interpretations concerning how families managed sickness. Some suggest people placed immense faith in the resilience of the body, relying primarily on rest and warmth. Others argue that sickness was deeply feared, prompting early households to adopt rituals of care long before formal medicine reached remote regions. The surviving notes, thin and inconsistent, leave much to speculation. A faint chill runs down your spine, urging you to shift closer to the fire's warmth. You inch, just slightly tugging the edge of a blanket more securely over your shoulder. The movement stirs a small swirl of cold air, but then the furs settle and warmth gathers again in a fragile pocket around your chest. You close your eyes and try to relax. Your mind drifts to a memory of how people in harsh winters often stayed in bed longer when illness threatened conserving energy the way animals conserve heat. One old seasonal booklet even advised families to let the weak sleep till the sun returns, a simple but profound approach to winter healing. You feel that wisdom now, letting your breathing slow and deepen. A faint pop comes from the fire. Embers shift, sending a flicker of red light across the room. You sense the animals adjusting in their sleep, maybe reacting to your earlier cough. Even the cabin seems to settle in response logs flexing slightly in the cold. Everything here listens. Everything reacts. You take another breath and let it fill you as much as the cabin's cold air allows. Your chest loosens further. The scratch in your throat fades a little. You realize your worry may have been larger than the actual ailment. Winter nights have a way of magnifying every sensation. Each ache becomes a threat, each chill a warning. Your body begins to settle again. Warmth spreads through your arms, your hands, your face. The heaviness in your limbs now feels more like fatigue than illness. Perhaps your earlier discomfort was just a reminder of how deeply the cold wears on the body. People of the past understood this intimacy with discomfort. They accepted it, knowing their bodies could adapt in ways that modern comfort often masks. Your breathing steadies. You let your head sink deeper into the bedding. A sense of calm begins to fall over you like a soft quilt. The fire's glow warms your eyes even with your lids closed. The night still feels long but less ominous. As you drift downward again into that drowsy haze, your body feels a little stronger, a little more willing to surrender to the healing that sleep can offer. The cabin hums softly around you, the cold held at bay for now. Your pulse slows, matching the measured rhythm of winter. And with one more long breath, you let yourself fall back into the deep quiet where rest becomes its own kind of medicine. You wake again to a dim glow shifting along the cabin walls, a different kind of light than fire provides. It is softer, steadier, almost hesitant. When your eyes adjust, you realize it comes from the lantern hanging near the hearth. Its wick has burned low, leaving only a trembling bead of brightness clinging to the top of the flame. Shadows creep and retreat with every tiny flicker stretching across the ceiling like slow-moving water. Lantern light shapes the room in ways that firelight never does. Fire dances, changes, erupts. Lanterns hover. They create stillness. Many families who lived through long winters relied on them heavily, and this reliance is recorded plainly in the simplest kinds of domestic writings, lists of supplies, small notes reminding owners to trim wicks marks beside entries, counting tallow or oil consumed through the cold months. As you watch the lantern now, you feel connected to those long-ago hands carefully maintaining their precious source of light. You shift slightly in your bedding, and a cold draft brushes your cheek. The lantern emphasizes every movement, making the smallest gesture feel deliberate. You can see the faint shimmer of frost on the floorboards and the glint of ice crusting the window's thin edges. The landscape beyond the walls is still dark, but inside the lantern gives the cabin just enough glow to reshape your sense of space. A small lantern like this was often used to navigate the room at night. People didn't carry bright lamps or torches. They carried modest circles of warm light that cast long shadows behind them. You imagine yourself lifting the lantern by its handle, the metal cold against your fingers, and watching the shadows leap ahead of you across the cabin walls. Its glow would have been enough to light a task, but never enough to banish the night entirely. You sit up slightly, listening as the lantern crackles faintly. That sound comes from the wick burning against old residue, tiny bits of carbon that cling stubbornly until trimmed. A delicate custom recalled in a fading family anecdote mentions how children sometimes beg to help trim the wick in the evenings, treating it as a special privilege. A steady hand was needed, since trimming too short led to a weak flame, and trimming too long caused smoke. You picture a child leaning close concentration, furrowing their brow, learning from a parent's patient instruction. Your eyes move to the tools beside the lantern, a small knife for cutting wicks, a shallow dish containing a mix of tallow and leftover grease from cooking hardened into pale lumps. The smell of it lingers faintly in the room. Homes once depended on these simple materials for illumination long before kerosene or cleaner fuels became widely available. The residue from such lanterns stained walls and ceilings over time, a fact visible in old cabins that have been preserved. You can almost see those stains now along your own rafter smudges softened by smoke and frost. There's a quiet stillness that lantern light brings. Unlike fire, it doesn't demand constant attention. It doesn't roar or sputter loudly. Instead, it hangs in place like a patient guardian, watching over the room while the fire rests. Some households were known to place lanterns near windows on especially dark nights, either to guide returning family members or simply to soften the sense of isolation. These practices live on in recollections gathered from descendants who grew up hearing winter stories from their grandparents. You watch the flame shift again, barely perceptible. It casts a blurred reflection on a metal pot near the hearth, creating the illusion of slow motion. The cold air in the cabin seems to thicken around the light, making it appear brighter by contrast. You breathe in, and the warmth from the lantern mixes with the coolness near your face, creating a sensation both grounding and strangely fragile. Your attention drifts to the shadows. Lantern shadows move differently from fire shadows, smoother, less erratic, sliding across surfaces like drifting smoke. They lengthen as the flame dims, shortening again when the lantern brightens under some invisible draft. You find yourself tracking their slow rhythm, your mind quieting along with them. In certain communities, winter nights were associated with storytelling illuminated by lanterns rather than flames. Some modern interpreters propose that lantern light encouraged softer, quieter tales because it didn't flare or pop unexpectedly. Others suggest the opposite, that lanterns simply supplemented the fire so people could continue mending tools or knitting, even after the flames burned low. The surviving counts do not fully agree, leaving room for multiple understandings of how light shaped long winter evenings. You imagine the cabin decades earlier, a family sitting close together, the lantern at the centre of the table, one person spinning a tale of ancestors or forest creatures, another sewing by that tiny glow, a child fighting sleep blinking slowly at the wavering flame. You feel as though you've stepped into the moment now, even though the cabin around you is quiet and half dreaming. A faint draught passes through the room, and the lantern flares slightly, sending a soft ripple of brightness toward the far wall. For a heartbeat, the cabin feels almost warm. Then the flame steadies again, settling into its small, devoted glow. Your thoughts wander to the materials that made such lanterns possible. Tallow, thick, smoky, pungent, produced a steady flame if prepared correctly. Oil lamps used by those who could obtain them burned cleaner, but needed frequent refilling. On rare occasions, someone might have a small candle made from beeswax gathered during warmer months. Candles, however, were often saved for special times. Their clean scent and bright glow were small luxuries in a long, smoky winter. You run a hand along your blanket, the soft rustle blending with the faint hum of the lantern. Its glow settles into your eyes and you feel your heart beat ease. Light has always shaped human comfort, and in winter, cabins' lantern light carried a gentler magic. It marked safety. It marked presence. It marked time in a world where the sun disappeared too soon each day. Your breathing slows. The room feels softer now. Shadows gather and disperse quietly along the walls as the lantern continues its calm vigil. Hours stretch and fold into one another in the dimness. You know the flame will not last forever, but for now it holds steady. You lower yourself back down, pulling the blankets close around your shoulders. The lantern rests above you like a small sun, offering its tiny warmth to the night. Your eyelids grow heavy again. Before sleep returns fully, the thought passes through your mind that such a small flame once carried entire households through countless winters, guiding tired hands and tired hearts through nights far darker than this one. You watch the glow one last time, then you let it fade behind your closing eyes. A low rumble reaches your ears before you fully understand what it means. At first it sounds distant, like a heavy cart rolling over packed snow somewhere far beyond the trees. But then it deepens, spreading through the air in a long, trembling vibration. You lift your head slightly from your bedding, blinking into the low light of the cabin, and realize the weather has turned. The storm is no longer creeping, it is arriving. The wind pushes against the cabin walls with a force that feels alive. A steady groaning pressure builds, then releases, then builds again. The logs answer with soft moans as they shift in their notches. Every joint in the cabin seems to speak at once. You have heard storms before, but this one carries a different weight, a heaviness that settles into your bones before you even move. Families living in isolated winter cabins often wrote matter-of-factly about these sudden weather changes, noting them in simple lines scattered through household diaries or almanacs. Storms did not always announce themselves clearly. Sometimes the sky seemed calm until night fell and then the wind rose without warning. Your own night mirrors those written observations, now quiet first, then turbulent, spreading like a slow wave. You sit up carefully and tug the blankets around your shoulders, feeling the first tendrils of cold slipping through small gaps in the cabin's seams. The fires burned low again, offering only a weak glow along the hearthstones. Outside, the storm gathers strength. Snow hurls itself sideways against the walls, producing a steady hiss that grows louder when gusts rise sharply. A peculiar little habit remembered in one grandmother's winter stories comes to mind. She would press her ear to the cabin wall during storms, claiming she could tell exactly how long they would last by the tone of the wind. Whether it was intuition or simple familiarity, the idea stays with you now. You lean just slightly toward the outer logs, listening with more attention than before. The wind's voice grows rougher. Snow scratches along the wood in small bursts. Something thumps outside, likely a branch dropping its heavy load or scraping across the roof. For a moment the cabin vibrates lightly beneath you, then settles again. Your heart quickens, but you stay still, adjusting to the rhythm of the storm. The animals shift too. The goat stomps once in its corner, snorting uneasily. The cow moves her weight from one leg to another, hooves clacking softly against the floorboards. The chickens murmur uneasy but not panicked. Their instincts feel sharper than yours, reacting before you consciously perceive changes in pressure or sound. Wind curls around the chimney, producing a hollow swirling note that rises and falls like a distant horn. You pull your blankets tighter. The cold intensifies, slipping through seams near the floorboards and gathering round your ankles. You consider rising to feed the fire again, but you hesitate, studying the storm's movement through sound alone. Researchers examining old winter accounts point out that families disagreed on how dangerous certain storms truly were. Some wrote that these nights felt terrifying, especially when the roof shuddered under strong gusts. Others described them as reassuring, claiming that storms could bring warmer air after a long stretch of bitter cold. The surviving descriptions vary widely, leaving no single way to interpret such nights. You sense both possibilities in the shifting wind. You finally rise, moving slowly through the cold air toward the hearth. Your breath hangs thick and pale before you. You kneel beside the embers and gather the coals with practiced motions. The storm outside seems to notice. Another long gust shakes the cabin. Snow patters against the roof like a handful of thrown sand. You brace yourself briefly, waiting until the house settles, then return to coaxing the flame alive. The fire responds reluctantly at first, then more eagerly as the new log catches. You feel warmth creep up your arms and across your face. The contrast makes the rest of the room feel even colder. You sense the storm pressing harder outside, but Inside, the fire starts building a soft barrier of heat that pushes back. As the cabin brightens, shadows leap across the rafters. You catch sight of frost shimmering near the window, the patterns more elaborate than before. The lantern glints faintly, catching the fire's reflection. You return to your bedding with the flame's warmth trailing behind you. You lie back down listening as the storm reshapes the night. The wind roars briefly, then drops into a long sigh. Snow slaps the logs, then drifts differently softer, as though settling into new patterns. The storm speaks in many tones, each one telling you something about the world outside. You imagine the forest bending under the storm's weight, trees swaying against the pressure, branches shedding snow that descends in heavy showers, paths disappearing beneath drifts. This imagery appears throughout generations of winter notes kept by remote families where storms were often described as remaking the land overnight. You feel the truth of that now. By morning, the entire world will look different. A gust hits the cabin with sudden force. The walls shake lightly. A pot near the hearth rattles. Even the bedding trembles. You grip the blankets tighter as the noise swells. Then just as suddenly it fades again. The wind drops into a quiet lull broken only by the soft hiss of snow sliding down the roof. These shifts send a subtle adrenaline through your body, but they also create a strange kind of calm. Unpredictability becomes its own rhythm. Storms do not move with neat patterns. They surge, then retreat. They test the walls, then give you a moment to breathe. You find yourself matching that rhythm without meaning to your breath, rising in tension, falling in release. You close your eyes briefly and listen for the subtle details. The storm's roar outside, the fire's whisper beside you, the animals shifting gently, the cabin making soft sounds of endurance. All of these noises blend into a single living environment. You imagine how many storms this cabin has known, how many winters, how many nights when people lay exactly where you're listening to the same restless wind. You sense their presence not as ghosts, but as memories embedded in the walls, carried forward through wood and experience. Another gust hits, but now you know its voice. Now you understand its pattern. You pull the blankets closer, let your body soften, and allow the storm to exist without forcing fear into you. It is simply another part of winter wild, strong temporary. Gradually the wind's fury begins to fade. The gusts grow shorter. The noise softens. The storm is not ending, but it is settling into a slower pulse. Snow still falls, but with less urgent force. The cabin seems to relax with you, loosening its creaks and sighs. Your breathing slows. The fire's warmth reaches your feet. The animals settle again. You close your eyes, letting the last murmurs of the storm wash through the room like distant waves. Winter has reminded you of its power, but has also shown you that you can weather its voice. And as sleep returns, you fade gently into the hush that follows the storm's loudest hours. When the storm finally softens into steady snowfall, the cabin settles into a calmer rhythm. You drift in and out of half sleep, no longer startled by every gust, no longer listening for danger in every creak. But even in this relative quiet winter finds ways to remind you that maintaining a cabin is never a passive act. A faint whistle of cold air brushes your ear, then another. You open your eyes and feel the room differently, sensing a small draft creeping across the floorboards. Repairs in winter often happened in the quietest hours, not because people preferred working at night, but because the cold revealed problems that daytime warmth concealed. This pattern shows up in plain remarks scattered through countless seasonal household notes where someone woke to a sudden chill and discovered a gap in the wall, chinking, or a shutter that had worked itself loose. Tonight you experience the same call to action. Comfort demands vigilance. You push back your blankets and sit up slowly. Your breath hangs in a pale cloud that drifts toward the rafters. The fire still glows, but not strongly enough to keep the cold from slipping through gaps. You pull on your coat, though it still holds the stiffness of earlier hours, and move quietly across the cabin. A narrow stream of cold air spills through a seam near the doorframe. It's small, but in winter small things matter. You run your hand along the edge, feeling the sharpness of the draft. With each gust outside, the air inside trembles just a little. You know that ignoring it will mean losing warmth you can't afford to waste. You look around for materials. Repair supplies are never elegant in deep winter. Families used whatever they had left over: moss strips of cloth, bits of hide, hardened pieces of tallow-soaked rope. In one almost forgotten winter notebook, a woman described stuffing cracks with stray feathers from a plucked chicken, insisting they blocked wind better than scraps of cloth. You picture such improvisation now, amused and impressed in equal measure. You find a small bundle of dried moss near the hearth, saved from warmer months, because it compresses well and expands slightly in moisture, perfect for filling winter gaps. You press it between your fingers to warm it, then wedge it carefully into the seam. The draft weakens, but doesn't disappear. You add a bit of cloth, pushing it gently into the wood's uneven edge. At last the cold stream reduces to almost nothing. The repair isn't perfect, but nothing in winter cabins ever was. Families made constant small adjustments, patching what the cold loosened. 10 minutes of work might make the difference between a tolerable night and a miserable one. You feel the truth of that as the cabin begins to warm slightly, the fire's modest heat no longer leaking out through an unnoticed gap. You turn next toward the window. Frost crusts its edges in intricate layers, but something looks uneven along the bottom. You kneel and touch the wood frame, finding a faint vibration of cold. A nearly forgotten cabin rhyme hints at this kind of problem. If frost grows thick at the window's toe, the night's breath has found a way to go. The phrasing is whimsical, but the meaning is practical. Frost where it shouldn't form often pointed to structural weakness. You shift a piece of cloth against the frame, mould it with your hands and tuck it tightly beneath the frost. The cold lessens again. The improvement is slight, but in winter, slight comforts accumulate like slow-burning embers. You sit back for a moment, studying your work. Tiny repairs like this decorate the life of anyone living through long winters. They reveal how attentive people had to be, how closely they listened to their homes. Those who study frontier building practices point out that not all cabins were built to the same standard. Some were sturdy and expertly crafted. Others were thrown together quickly with limited materials or skill. This uneven quality means that no single rule applies to how cabins aged or failed during storms. Each structure had its own needs and quirks. You rise again and check one more place, the seam near the roof beam, where earlier frost drifted onto your bedding. You press your palm there now, feeling only a faint coolness rather than the sharp bite of escaping air. Still, you add a little more insulation, pressing it into the slight depression where log meets log. Your fingers tingle as they work, growing numb from the cold wood. You breathe on them once, warming them just enough to finish the job. When you return to the hearth, your hands are stiff and your coat colder than before. You close your eyes briefly, letting exhaustion brush along your thoughts. Your body is tired from small necessary tasks performed in the dark. Winter demands this kind of work at unexpected times. What seems minor during the day becomes urgent at night when warmth is thin and every degree matters. You place another log gently onto the embers, watching it catch with a subdued glow. The fire brightens just enough to make the repairs feel worth the interruption. You can already sense a difference. The air no longer stings so sharply across your ankles. The warmth spreads more evenly. The cabin feels less exposed. You sit beside the fire for a few breaths, stretching your fingers toward the heat. The animals stir softly, sensing the change in temperature. The goat shifts. The cow lets out a low, sleepy hum. Even the chickens rustle quietly in their straw, reassured by the rising warmth. You return to your bedding, pulling the blankets up to your chin. The cabin feels calmer now, patched and protected for another stretch of night. You feel calmer too. The storm continues outside, but inside your small acts of repair hold back the cold just enough to restore peace. You settle your head against the rough pillow. The fire crackles softly. The repaired walls sigh with gentle ease. The air is warmer. The blankets feel heavier. Your breathing grows slow again. And as the wind circles the cabin once more, finding fewer places to slip inside, you let yourself fall back into the quiet fold of sleep, knowing the night is safer for the care you gave it. The night deepens, and with it comes a heaviness that is not purely physical. You lie beneath your blankets, watching the fire's faint glow waver along the walls, and an unexpected weight gathers somewhere behind your ribs. It isn't fear. It isn't exhaustion. It is something quieter, slower, harder to name. Winter settles not only on the land but on the mind. Long ago, people living through months of cold and darkness often felt a similar inward pull. This mood is reflected in plain unembellished lines scattered throughout personal winter journals, short notes about low spirits, heavy mornings, or the mind growing slow. They didn't use modern labels, but their words carry the same subtle shadows you feel now. When daylight lasts only a few hours and the world remains frozen outside your door, the mind shifts in ways you cannot ignore. You take a slow breath. The air feels heavy and your lungs dry and cool. The fire's dimness adds to the dimness inside you. Even the familiar sounds of the cabin, creaking logs, animals breathing softly, seem quieter than before, as though everything has retreated into itself. You sense how easy it is to slip into long stretches of thought that spiral inward rather than outward. Your body is tired, but not with the comforting tiredness of purposeful labour. This fatigue sits differently, as if woven from both cold and stillness. You shift slightly, trying to ease the pressure in your chest. The blankets hold warmth, but the heaviness does not lift entirely. A spare little habit hinted at in one settler's late-life memoir comes to mind during the darkest weeks. Families sometimes placed a small branch of evergreen near the hearth, believing its scent or colour could ease the spirit. Whether the belief was practical or symbolic hardly matters. The gesture itself suggests a deep understanding of winter's emotional toll. You imagine such a branch, now green and fragrant, a whisper of life in a world that feels too still. The room feels smaller than it did earlier, the ceiling lower, the shadows thicker. In the fire's glow, the frost on the logs appears like pale veins threading the walls. You watch them slowly gather and melt in tiny cycles, as though the cabin itself breathes in shallow, uneven rhythm. The sensation affects you more than you expect. You pull your blanket tighter. Some families once coped with these winter moods by singing softly before bed. Not lively songs, just quiet verses buried deep in tradition, repeated in cold months to remind the heart of the warmth. The idea appears gently in a handful of winter notebooks. We hummed a little while stirring the embers. You can almost hear such a sound now, low and calm, drifting through the stillness, like a thin thread of comfort. You close your eyes and listen for any echo of that imagined melody. Instead, you hear only the wind outside brushing against the cabin in long, deliberate strokes. Its voice is calmer now, no longer storming, but sighing as though weary of its own force. The sound adds to your mood, neither soothing nor troubling, just present. You think about how long these nights must have felt to the people who lived through them year after year. Children, parents, elders, everyone facing the same slow press of time. Many surviving accounts describe the feeling of the mind thickening in midwinter, as if thoughts moved sluggishly or motivation dimmed. These remarks appear across different households and decades mirroring one another, despite differences in climate or background. The consistency suggests that this inward heaviness was a familiar companion to long winters. You shift again, letting your muscles relax. The blankets cradle you, but the heaviness persists. It isn't unpleasant exactly, just weighty like a snowdrift resting on the spirit. You wonder how many people before you lay awake like this, staring into the half-dark, questioning their own restlessness. Interpretations of these winter moods vary depending on which sources scholars trust most. Some modern readers see these old lines as signs of melancholy shaped by isolation. Others believe early homesteaders simply described normal reactions to darkness and fatigue without assigning emotional meaning. The surviving writings give no absolute answer, and perhaps that is fitting. Winter affects everyone differently. You draw in another breath and let it out slowly. The rhythm feels grounding. Your body begins to soften again, warmed by the fire's small pulse. Even so, your thoughts wander toward the weight of time. How many nights like this stretch through the season? How many hours of darkness must you pass before the sun grows stronger? Yet even in this heaviness a quiet strength emerges. The stillness of the cabin feels almost like a cocoon. The cold presses close, but the blankets hold you. The dark settles deep, but the fire refuses to go out. You realize that enduring winter is not simply a matter of physical resilience. It also asks the mind to settle, to breathe, to continue even when motivation grows thin. A near-forgotten winter gesture tucked between lines of an old letter mentioned that people sometimes stepped outside just before sleep if the weather allowed. A brief moment under the night sky was said to clear the frost from the thoughts. You imagine stepping outside now, feeling the shock of cold air on your cheeks, seeing stars sharp enough to cut through the gloom. The idea offers a brief mental lift even though you remain beneath your blankets. Your mind drifts toward tomorrow, toward dawn, chores, firewood, the routine that fills each day. The thought steadies you. Routines gave winter structure. Even the smallest tasks, pounding ice off tools, sweeping frost from corners, helped people regain a sense of control. You feel that truth settling into you gently. Your breathing slows even more. The fire pops lightly. The animals shift in their sleep, making soft sounds that bring a sense of companionship. In moments like this, shared presence matters more than words. The heaviness in your chest eases slightly. Not gone, but softened. Winter's emotional weight does not disappear on command, it melts gradually like frost by a modest flame. You accept this, letting the feeling exist without resisting it. You close your eyes again. The cabin embraces you in its rough wooden quiet. The darkness presses close, but not in a way that frightens. Instead, it invites you to rest deeper, to slow your thoughts, to surrender to the stillness that winter demands. Your breath warms the air near your face. The blankets hold fast. And slowly, not quickly, not dramatically, the heaviness becomes manageable, settling into a quiet place inside you. You let sleep take you again, knowing the night is long, but you're still here, still warm, still enduring. As you drift through the night's quiet, another awareness slowly rises to the surface. The cabin has its own smell. Not a single scent, but a layered tapestry built over weeks of fire, labour meals, sleep and breath. You inhale gently, and the air carries a mixture that is thick and unmistakable, an entire season preserved in fragrance. The scent of smoke comes first. It clings to every surface from the rafters overhead to the blankets wrapped around you. It settles into your hair, your clothing, even the lines on your hands. Smoke is the cabin's backbone, shaping the atmosphere hour by hour. Its presence is evident not because someone described it poetically, but because countless winter entries found in old daybooks mention cleaning soot from beams or shaking it out of bedding in early spring. You can almost taste the faint tang of burned wood on the back of your tongue as you breathe. Next comes the smell of cooked foods, fat rendered into broth-root vegetables, softened in long-simmered stews, scraps of grain, or dried meat stored near the hearth. The aroma never truly leaves the room. It settles into the logs and floorboards, creating a warm undercurrent that mingles with the more persistent smoke. Even now, hours after the evening meal, you catch hints of thyme or onions softened by time and heat. The scent feels grounding, a reminder of warmth earned earlier in the night. But winter introduces stranger notes too. Cold has its own odour, sharp, metallic, carrying something faintly like stone or frozen earth. When the door cracks open or a draught slips through the seams, that scent appears for an instant crisp and clean before being swallowed by warmer smells. The contrast makes the warmth feel richer, almost sweeter. You breathe it in now, the faint edge of frost mixing with the cozy density of the cabin. And then there are the scents produced simply by living. People in close quarters develop a shared fragrance wool that has absorbed sweat and smoke-damp socks drying near the fireskin that rarely meets warm water. Even the animals resting near the wall contribute their own warmth and musk. A wandering peddler once noted in a brief winter recollection that cabins smelled like life compressed in a small wooden box. The phrase, though simple, fits perfectly now. You shift in your bedding and the furs beneath you release a soft wave of animal scent, earthy, warm, slightly oily. Some families used bear hide, others deer or elk. Whatever the source, the smell was part comfort, part reminder of the world outside. The fur's natural oils linger for years, softening over time but never disappearing entirely. The warmth of your body stirs those oils, now creating a faint aroma that blends seamlessly with the rest of the cabin. Your blankets carry their own distinct fragrance. Wool, when warmed, releases a dry, slightly grassy smell, subtle but unmistakable. That scent might once have reminded someone of summer pastures, or spinning wheels creaking in a farmhouse loft. You imagine the wool being washed, carded and shaped long before it found its way to this cabin, carrying remnants of hands and seasons from another place. The smell feels like history itself, quiet but persistent. The longer you lie still, the more these scents merge into a single layered presence. None dominates, none disappears. They form a kind of sensory landscape no modern home recreates. In restored cabins, visitors often describe a similar experience, an unmistakable blend of smokewood fabric and something harder to define, something like memory. The scent is so distinctive that preservation workers handling old wooden beams report recognizing it instantly when they open sealed structures that have rested untouched for decades. As you breathe slowly, the scents evoke a gentle tiredness. Each inhale carries warmth, familiarity, and a strange comfort that doesn't belong to any single source. Winter living has always been about endurance, but scent plays a quiet role too. Binding days together, anchoring the mind when the world outside disappears into endless white. You imagine how families before you reacted to this mix of fragrances. Some surely found it soothing, associating the smell with home safety and survival. Others might have longed for the clean scent of fresh spring air or the sweetness of blooming fields. The cabin smell was constant, unavoidable, a presence that shaped winter memories for months at a time. Modern interpreters reading handwritten recollections have noted differing impressions, some warm and nostalgic, some weary and heavy, each shaped by the writer's experience and temperament. You shift again, feeling the blanket settle around you. The air closest to your face holds the richest mixture of scents, warmed by your breath and thickened by the wool. You let it wash through you, slowly letting your awareness sink deeper into the room. Even the fire's scent has layers. Beneath the smoke lies the resin of pine or the deeper aroma of hardwood oak ash or birch, depending on what was cut and stored months earlier. Each type of wood leaves a different trace. Pine creates a sweeter scent, sharp at first but mellow with time. Oak produces a warm, almost bread-like undertone. Birch leaves a faint sweetness beneath the smoke, subtle but steady. You sense traces of these now, though you cannot name them precisely. The cabin carries their signatures long after the logs have turned to ash. A soft breath beside you, animal or imagined companion, adds warmth to the air. Even that breath has its own scent, alive and real, joining the others like another instrument in a quiet orchestra. Your eyelids grow heavier. The blended scent of the cabin becomes comforting, pulling your mind gently away from thought and into a slow, drifting calm. These smells, persistent and layered, create the backdrop of winter life. They stay with you, settle around you, and soften the edges of long, cold nights. As your breathing steadies again, the scents fade into the background of your awareness, no longer distinct but woven together. They become part of the cabin's quiet heartbeat, reassuring you through the dark. You close your eyes fully. Wrapped in wool, fur, and the familiar fragrance of a winter home, you surrender to sleep once more. Somewhere in the quiet hours that follow, a subtle shift begins. It isn't dawn yet, not even close, but something in the air hints at a coming change. You lie still beneath your blankets and notice it the way someone notices a faint scent or a distant vibration, not through sight, but through a slight lift in the atmosphere around you. Winter nights do not brighten quickly, but they do loosen their grip in small, almost imperceptible ways. The fire settled into a low bed of embers glowing with steady, patient light. The room remains cold, but not as sharp as before. The air feels a touch less heavy against your skin. You turn your head toward the tiny window. It is still dark, still covered in frost, yet the frost looks different, less opaque, more delicate. The edges sparkle faintly as though responding to something beyond the trees. Frontier families often noticed these early signs long before the sun appeared. Simple winter entries recorded in old household books mention how the blackness of the cabin softened in the hours approaching dawn, even when no visible light had entered. You sense that softening now. It's as if the night is breathing out after holding its breath for too long. You lift yourself slightly, feeling the stiffness in your joints. The floorboards are cold. Your breath still forms a pale cloud. Yet some part of you knows the night is past its deepest point, as though the earth beneath you has begun to tilt ever so slightly toward the coming day. A faint crackle drifts from the rafters overhead. The roof timbers respond to the slow temperature change, relaxing from the tension of the storm. The sound is gentle, natural. Earlier such noises stirred worry. Now they feel reassuring, like the cabin settling more comfortably into its place as the cold shifts around it. You listen for a while, attuning yourself to every sound. The animals breathe slowly in their corner. The wind outside has retreated to a soft murmur. Snow still falls, but lightly, almost politely. The world beyond these walls feels calmer, as if it too senses dawn approaching from somewhere far away. There was a quiet observation someone once recorded in a bundle of winter letters. The night grows thinner before it grows brighter. The meaning becomes clear to you now. You feel it in the loosened stillness of the room, in the muted quality of the dark, in the faint ease settling across your chest. It is not light you sense, it is the promise of light. You let your gaze drift toward the walls. Frost patterns glow faintly in the emberlight, casting thin lines of silver that seem gentler than they did earlier. The cold still clings to the logs, but it feels different, not hostile, not pressing so sharply inward. Just present. You shift beneath your blankets. The warmth you've built stays with you, held close by the layers of wool and fur. Your body adjusts in small ways to the subtle promise that the night is passing. This is how people once measured time in winter, through feeling, through rhythm, through instinct. Without clocks, without lamps bright enough to mark the hours clearly, the body became the timekeeper. A near-forgotten detail whispered in one family's oral history claims that children often woke moments before dawn, sensing the approach of morning before any adult did. Perhaps it was imagination. Perhaps it was sensitivity born from early rising chores. But the idea lingers as you lie here, feeling a similar stir of awareness. You picture the sky outside, though you cannot see it. Somewhere beyond the window above the treetops, the first faint hint of blue may be forming, even if the cabin remains sunk in darkness. Frozen air tends to carry light, slowly filtering it through layers of cold until it moves like a thin band rather than a sudden burst. You imagine that band growing somewhere just out of sight. Your breathing deepens, softens. The cold no longer bites, but sits quietly around you, watchful but less oppressive. You sense the long winter night shifting toward its final hours, even though true morning remains far beyond your reach. Scholars examining historical winter routines Sometimes note that people's internal clocks adapted naturally to seasonal darkness, waking gently as dawn approached no matter how long or heavy the night had been. These interpretations rely on scattered snippets of journals and letters, leaving room for several possible readings, but right now the idea feels plausible. Your body stirs without command, aligning itself with a change you cannot yet see. You close your eyes for a moment and let the sensation flow through you. You feel lighter than before, less burdened by the weight of the night. Even the cabin seems to exhale with you, its walls no longer straining under the cold, but resting quietly in the soft hush that follows a storm. The animals shift again. A soft thump, a gentle exhale. They sense something too. Creatures kept close during winter were often more attuned to subtle shifts than people, and old writing sometimes mentioned that livestock stirred earlier, on days when weather was set to change. You hear the cow shifting her straw, the goat adjusting its stance. These tiny movements reinforce what your body already knows: the night is beginning to loosen. You open your eyes once more. The window remains dark, but the darkness feels different, less absolute. You watch as frost crystals catch the ember light in new ways, forming faint glimmers across the glass. The effect is small, almost hidden, but unmistakable. You lie back, slowly easing into your blankets. A soft warmth gathers around your shoulders. Your pulse steadies, aligning with the quieter rhythm of the cabin. You're not fully awake, but not entirely asleep either. You exist in a gentle in-between, suspended in the thinning night. And as you breathe deeper, the thought settles quietly into your mind. Morning is still distant, but it is on its way. The darkness knows it. The cabin knows it. Your body knows it. You close your eyes again, letting that assurance carry you gently back into rest. As the night thins further and your body drifts between waking and dreaming, your thoughts wander toward the world you know, now the one with thermostats, mattresses, electric lights, and soft blankets washed in warm water. It feels almost unreal compared to the rough, fragile warmth of this cabin. You lie still beneath your layers and begin to notice the contrast not as judgment, but as quiet curiosity. What does it mean to sleep now in a world so different from the one this cabin belonged to? The cold air around you sharpens that question. Each breath reminds you how carefully people once managed their nights. There were no guarantees, only fire tended by human hands, only warmth earned through effort. Modern life rarely asks you to negotiate with the night in this way. Many memories preserved in plain remarks from early homesteads show that people understood the night differently. They respected it more, feared it more, and accepted it more deeply than most of us do today. You shift your weight slightly and feel the roughness of the straw mattress through the thick fur. The ground beneath you is unyielding. Your joints feel it. Your back feels it. In your own time, a bed is soft-shaped to your body, warmed by layers of fabric engineered for comfort. Here, comfort is improvised, something built from wool hide, and whatever warmth your body can keep from escaping. Your mind glides toward the way darkness works in modern life. Darkness now is optional. Streetlights glow through windows, screens illuminate rooms, soft lights flicker on at the touch of a switch. But in this cabin, night is absolute. It has its own presence, its own weight. Your eyes adjust slowly, even painfully, to every glimmer. Lanterns and fire were once precious, measured carefully. People noted this in the little housekeeping lines hidden in old journals, entries describing how fuel was rationed or how candles were saved for specific moments. Light was not a convenience, it was strategy. You inhale and your breath fogs in front of your face. You think about the climate-controlled air you breathe at home, dry or warm or cool, depending on what the small device on the wall commands. Here the air has a will of its own. It changes with the weather, the fire, the drafts you patched earlier. It pushes against you. It defines how you move, how you sleep, how you think. Another faint creak flows through the rafters. The roof loosens again with the changing temperature. You feel the cabin echo inside your body. Modern homes do not speak this way. They hum with distant appliances or the quiet rush of vents, but they do not creak with cold or settle audibly under snow. They remain still silent, guarded by insulation and engineered stability. A researcher studying reconstructed frontier cabins once remarked that sleeping in such places requires listening in ways modern houses do not teach. You understand this now more clearly than ever. You pull the blanket closer to your chin. The weight presses gently into your shoulders. Modern bedding is light, lofty, warm without effort. In this cabin, warmth comes with heaviness. Wool presses down, furs pin you in place. The feeling is comforting, but also grounding, reminding you that warmth has substance here. It was not produced by machines, but by hands, by animals, by seasons of preparation. You allow your mind to wander further, imagining your own bedroom back home. A bed raised off the floor, sheets soft enough to forget, pillows that hold your head effortlessly. None of that fits in this room. Early families slept close to the ground on sacks filled with straw or dried grass. This method appears consistently in everyday winter notes, simple, functional, hardly ideal. Yet it kept them alive night after night. You shift your legs under the blankets and feel a faint chill creep up from the floor. A slight shiver fills your chest. In your own world, a cold moment in the night means adjusting a dial or pulling an extra blanket from a closet. Here, a cold moment means tending the fire again or adjusting moss in a drafty seam. The night demands participation. You can't simply lie still and expect comfort to return on its own. Your thoughts float towards sound. Modern nights buzz faintly with distant road, appliances humming, or the low surge of city life. Cabin nights are quieter but not silent. The absence of machine noise creates space for the smallest details. The pop of a cooling log, the sigh of a sleeping animal, your own heartbeat blending with the quiet. People wrote candidly about these sounds in winter notes kept by isolated households. To them, the night was full of tiny signals, each one meaningful. You breathe again more deeply now. A calm settles into you. The differences between past and present don't feel superior or inferior. They simply feel true. You realize that something in you responds to both worlds. You appreciate the convenience and warmth of your own time, but you also feel the strange clarity that comes from sleeping in a place where every breath matters. Every ember matters, every patch of draft requires attention. Different chroniclers portray these contrasts in uneven ways. Some romanticize the past, others condemn it as hardship. Neither perspective fully captures the quiet nuance of lying here, now wrapped in the warmth of your own body, listening to the fire's soft pulse resting in a world that once demanded patience and humility. You settle back into your bedding, letting both versions of life weave together in your thoughts. One life where warmth is automatic, another where warmth is earned. One life where night is softened with electricity, another where night settles with ancient quiet. As your breathing slows again, you realize that both kinds of sleep reveal something about being human, the desire for rest, for safety, for stillness. Whether on a straw mattress or a spring-filled one, whether lit by a lantern or a soft bedside lamp, the need is the same. You close your eyes, letting the cold cabin and your warm modern memories blur together. For a moment, time feels thin enough to fold. Then your mind softens, your body loosens, and the rhythm of winter night pulls you gently back towards sleep. The cabin holds you, your thoughts quiet, and the long night continues. A soft rustle stirs you again, not from inside the cabin this time, but from somewhere beyond the walls. You lie still, listening with a kind of focus that only winter nights can teach. The sound is faint at first, almost like cloth brushing against wood. Then it grows clearer, a slow sweep of something moving across the frozen ground. You hold your breath, waiting for it to repeat. It does. A gentle dragging, then a pause, another step. the unmistakable crunch of snow under small paws. Some creature is approaching the cabin. In the diaries of people who once lived this kind of life, small nighttime visitors appear frequently: foxes, hares, weasels, even stray dogs seeking warmth. The notes are simple, practical, never dramatic. A fox came near the door, one entry reads. We heard its steps, says another. The tone conveys how ordinary these encounters became during harsh winters. You sense that ordinariness now, even as your instinct sharpens. The animal outside moves closer. You can tell by the way the snow shifts. Its gait is light, deliberate. Not heavy enough to be a deer, not sharp enough to be a wolf, maybe a fox or a curious weasel nosing along the wall for warmth. The idea doesn't frighten you. Instead, it pulls you deeper into the night, making the cabin feel less like an isolated bubble and more like part of a living winter world. You lift your head slightly. The frost on the window glimmers with faint patterns swirling like leaves caught in ice. Beyond it there is only darkness. But you imagine the shape anyway. Tail, low ears, pricked nose, pointed toward the seams where faint heat escapes the cabin. Frontier observers noted that animals often sought these tiny warm spots pressing close to the logs during bitter cold. Their presence was not intrusion, but quiet coexistence. The creature pauses. You picture it lifting its head, listening. Then a soft thump touches the wall, barely audible. Perhaps it nudged the logs with its nose or tapped them with a paw. In one faint winter memory told around a cook fire, a settler recalled how foxes tapped cabins gently before curling up beside them, as if asking permission to share the cold. Whether anyone believed it literally or just appreciated the image didn't matter. The thought softened the winter nights. You settle deeper into your blankets and let your imagination wander outside. You picture the creature circling the cabin, searching for a place to settle. The snow is deep, the night is long, and the cold presses against every living thing. Even predators conserve their energy in such weather, seeking shelter rather than prey. That simple reality echoes through a scattering of naturalist observations that describe how animals treat winter as a truce enforced by the elements. A soft scratching noise reaches you, brief, cautious. Perhaps the visitor has found a sheltered corner near the woodpile or a dip beneath the eaves where the wind cannot reach. You sense its presence not as a threat, but as companionship. A reminder that survival is shared across species on nights like this. Inside the cabin, the animals sense the visitor too. The goat lifts its head, lets out a soft huff, and then relaxes. The cow shifts once, but without alarm. Even the chickens rustle only slightly before settling again. Their reactions tell you everything. Whatever is outside poses no danger. As you breathe deeply and slowly, you notice how your awareness stretches outward. For a moment you imagine stepping into the cold to see the animal properly. You picture your boots crunching through snow, your breath rising in pale plumes, the creature's eyes reflecting faint firelight. Yet you also know how quickly the cold would cut into you, how fast your warmth would slip away. Staying inside feels wiser, and the moment feels complete without leaving your blankets. A gentle thud echoes faintly from outside, so small it might have been the creature settling onto the ground. Then comes quiet, long, unbroken quiet. You close your eyes, imagining a tiny body curled in the snow's cradle, wrapped against the wind. The idea drifts through your mind with surprising tenderness. Different storytellers from earlier winters left behind uneven interpretations of these encounters. Some described wild visitors as omens, good or bad, depending on the season. Others saw them as harmless neighbours moving through the same frozen world. Still others barely mentioned them at all, treating such visits as inevitable parts of winter life. The variety reflects how personal these moments were shaped by mood, weather, and the quiet hours before dawn. You shift slightly and feel warmth pool again around your shoulders. The cabin's scents, smoke, wool, and the lingering fragrance of simmered food wrap around you like a second blanket. The visitor outside becomes part of the night's tapestry, just one more thread woven into the quiet. You imagine the forest beyond trees heavy with snow, their branches drooping under frozen weight. The world is silent in a way that only winter can create. Every sound is dampened by the thick blanket covering the earth. Footsteps vanish quickly, breath crystallizes, time slows. You inhale again deeply. The air inside the cabin tastes warmer than before, rich with the softness of wool and the faint sweetness of dying embers. Outside, the creature rests. Inside, you rest. The shared stillness bridges the world separated by thin wooden walls. Gradually, the faint familiarity of your breathing lulls your mind again. The visitor disappears from your awareness not by leaving, but by becoming part of the quiet surrounding you. The presence is no longer a point of focus, just another element of the night. The fire crackles faintly. The animals' breaths deepen. The frost on the window glows with faint, silvery hints of the coming dawn. You sink further into your blankets, letting the weight of winter settle gently across your body, no longer heavy but comforting. And with a slow, steady breath, you drift once more towards sleep, your heartbeat matching the calm, patient rhythm of all the living creatures weathering the night beside you. You drift in the thinned darkness warm beneath your blankets when a new sound reaches you, not sharp, not threatening, but steady. A soft tapping, quiet at first, then clearer. You open your eyes and turn your head toward the window. The frost-covered glass trembles faintly with each touch. Something is happening outside, but the rhythm is gentle enough to keep your body relaxed. You listen more closely. The tapping continues, regular and calm, like fingers brushing lightly against wood. Then, after a long pause, you hear a faint patter snow, slipping from branches, landing in delicate flurries against the cabin wall. You draw a slow breath and realize this is the beginning of a familiar winter ritual, the subtle shift before dawn when the world outside becomes strangely lively, as if preparing itself for light. Families who lived through many winters often mention in simple remarks that the hours before sunrise were full of tiny, almost secret motions. These notes describe the way trees tightened or released, how ice cracked softly along frozen paths, how snow settled into new shapes. You begin to understand those observations now as the tapping merges with quieter sounds, shifting, drifts, settling branches, a faint ripple of air. Inside the cabin responds in small ways. The rafters give a light groan. The doorframe creaks. Even the fire, though nearly burned to its last embers, glows with a kind of sleepy anticipation. You feel the room adjusting around you as if acknowledging the slow approach of a new day. A tiny sparkle forms on the frost lining the window. You rise just enough to glimpse it. A pale shimmer touches the ice edges, a living softness, rather than the hard shine of moonlight. It is not bright enough to illuminate the room, but it marks a shift in the darkness. Morning is still distant, but not absent. You sit quietly, not wanting to disturb the delicate moment. The animals sense something too. The goat lifts its head and sniffs at the air, then settles again. The cow shifts in her straw. The chickens murmur lightly as if adjusting their positions in anticipation of the coming change. Such reactions were often noted by travellers observing winter routines. Animals seem to detect the earliest hints of dawn, long before human eyes could see it. You pull your blanket more tightly around your shoulders. A soft glow inches across the window, the first true hint of morning. As it strengthens, something else happens. The frost begins to change. The intricate patterns glisten like silver filigree, each design catching new colour. It is the same window you looked at all night, but in this softening light it becomes almost luminous. You watch the frost as though it were alive. A small memory preserved in a fading winter tale speaks of family sometimes rising early, just to watch frost flowers bloom with the dawn. The story claims that the patterns shimmered differently in the first rays of light, creating tiny laces of beauty that disappeared as quickly as they came. Whether the detail is literal or part of a romantic retelling, the moment feels real enough now. You push yourself up slowly from your bedding, creaking joints, reminding you of the cold night. The air bites at your arms as soon as you leave the cocoon of blankets, but curiosity outweighs discomfort. You move carefully toward the window. The floor is icy beneath your feet, sending a quiet shiver up your spine. When you reach the frozen pane, you hold your breath. The frost shift continues, minute crystals glowing softly, dim light filtering through them. It feels like watching dawn grow from inside a crystal. You touch the edge of the frame, gently avoiding the icy surface. The cold stings your fingertips, but the beauty holds you still. The world outside remains mostly hidden, but its shape begins to form through the frost patterns. A darker line suggests the curve of a tree trunk. A faint bluish cast hints at snow-covered ground. Earlier the darkness felt endless. Now it softens into possibility. Behind you, the embers flare with a final sigh as they settle deeper into ash. The fire is nearly gone, but you leave it for the moment. The slow return of daylight is enough warmth to hold you upright. You watch as the first true glow begins to gather beyond the trees and trickle into the sky. The shift is subtle but powerful. Somewhere in the forest, a bird gives a single tentative chirp, quick, bright, fragile. The sound pierces the hush of the cabin in a way that feels sacred. In the quiet of this early hour, you understand why once long ago families marked the first light of each winter day with soft gratitude. Their records do not dramatize the moment, but they highlight the sense of renewal it carried. After hours of long, cold waiting, dawn meant movement, warmth, chores, food, hope. You inhale deeply. The air inside the cabin smells a little different now, cooler, sharper, touched by the first breath of morning slipping through the cracks. You feel awake not through force, but through quiet recognition. You survived another winter night. Gradually you return to your place by the fire. You add a small piece of wood to the embers, coaxing a new flame to life. Daylight and firelight merge gently, each strengthening the other. The room fills with soft shadows and warmer hues. You sit and let the warmth wash over your face. The frost continues glowing. The animals rest peacefully, and outside the forest begins to stir. Morning is here. Its arrival feels like a whisper, soft, gentle, full of promise. And as the world begins to brighten, the long night at last releases its hold. Word count 1197. 300-word wind down. Now the cabin grows lighter, not quickly, but with a slow, delicate grace that eases into every corner. The frost on the window softens into pale lace, its patterns fading as the warmth from the new fire rises. Your breath no longer hangs heavy in the air. Instead, it drifts gently, blending with the calmer light beginning to fill the room. You sit a little straighter, your body warming slowly, your mind loosening its final knots of night. Outside, the world remains quiet, wrapped in soft snow and early stillness, yet something in the air has changed. The cold is no longer a sharp edge. It is a muted hush, thinning with each passing breath. You take in this moment the way someone sips warm tea, slowly and with intention. The blankets still hold the faint warmth of your sleeping body, and the fire murmurs softly, offering light that ripples like a calm heartbeat. Every sound is gentler now, every shadow lighter. Even the cabin seems to exhale, releasing the tension it carried through the long darkness. As you breathe deeper, your thoughts begin to drift, settling like feathers in quiet air. You feel the weight of the night slip away, leaving only a soft memory behind. Of firelight, of cold air, of quiet endurance, of all the small moments that kept you company in the hours when the world was dark. Let your shoulders loosen, let your breath slow, let your mind dim one last time. Imagine the warmth gathering around you like a soft glow, gentle and steady. Imagine the light outside lifting slowly over the trees, turning the snow to pale silver. You're safe. You're warm. Let the lust of the night fade away. Sweet dreams.